Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The mayor has called the meeting to order. Let's start. Mayor Lindsay.
Here.
Councilmember Petros.
Here.
Councilmember Moss.
Here.
Councilmember Dela Cruz.
Here.
Councilmember Gross.
Here.
Councilmember McCormick. And Vice Mayor Kaplan.
Here.
We do have a quorum, Mayor, if we may please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With us this evening is Reverend Susan Bertel from St. Christopher's by the Sea to provide us with an invocation. Please remain standing. Sorry.
Good evening. Before I start, I want to thank everybody for the honor of being able to be here tonight and with the opening invocation. Mara, Frank, council members, I'd also like to take a little bit of a clergy license this evening because we've lost one of our own this morning, and I just want to offer a tribute because of what happened with Eric Verbeck. And in many ways, the Key is so small and such a very tight-knit community, it affects everybody, even if you didn't know him. And if you don't know what happened, I apologize if I've caught you off guard. One of my favorite poems is by 17th century priest, philosopher and theologian John Donne. I won't repeat the whole poem, but in circumstances such as these, I'm often reminded of his statement in the poem that when something happens, when someone dies, I am diminished. And we all are, because we're all part of the human race. So I would offer a prayer. Let us pray. Most merciful God, whose wisdom is beyond our understanding, deal graciously with Peter and Patty and Michael and their family in their grief. Surround them with your love, that they may not be overwhelmed by their loss, but have confidence in your goodness and strength to meet the days to come. And for tonight's council meeting, I offer this prayer. Gracious God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with those who take counsel in this meeting for the renewal of the mission of Key Biscayne. So rule the hearts of those who bear authority of government in this and every land, that they may perceive what is right, be led by wise decisions, right actions, and grant them both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it. Through your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Next item, Mayor's brief comments by council.
Council members, other than what a wonderful family on the Key weekend. It was a wonderful event by the Chamber of Commerce. Community came together. We met a lot of our merchants, and we all got together for some fun in a wonderful civic area, and we're so very fortunate to be able to have events like that. Yes, Katie.
I wanted to mention that one of our residents, Christina Bracken, is doing an initiative of getting people to vote, and she's working tirelessly. March is actually considered the Go Vote Miami month, and if anybody's interested in knowing more, you can now register to vote online, and this whole group is really trying to increase the number of registered voters so that when the election comes, everybody has a voice. And I wanted to applaud her for her efforts and to encourage everybody to get more information.
Thank you. Yes. With that, I am going to open. Actually, we have a couple of special presentations. We have a proclamation that I will start with, but manager did ask if we would indulge him by changing the order for special presentations and put the presentation by Glenn Wallman from the Youth Athletics Advisory Board as B, and the permit analysis as C, and add, I believe, the discussion to permit analysis at this point as well.
Bring forth 10D too, yes, ma'am.
Bring forth 10D as well. If that is the will of the council, we'd like to make that.
10D, you mean in the same category as the special presentations?
Correct, which is the manager's item.
Moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item is the presentation of a proclamation to observe March 21st, 2018 as World Down Syndrome Day. Mayor Lindsay.
Yes, and I have the honor of having this proclamation in front of me. It's a proclamation from the Office of the Mayor, whereas World Down Syndrome Day is a global awareness day which has been officially observed by the United Nations since 2012. And whereas there are an estimated 6 million people with Down syndrome in the world today, and whereas individuals with Down syndrome have tremendous potential to live full and fulfilling lives as contributing members of the community, and whereas people with Down syndrome deserve fundamental human and civil rights, and yet many countries, people with Down syndrome are still not afforded those rights, and whereas the Village of Key Biscayne fully supports the rights, inclusion, and well-being of all individuals with Down syndrome, and whereas despite dramatic increases in lifespan and intellectual ability in the U.S., there is still much work to be done regarding the rights to equality, inclusion, education, medical care, research, and support for people with Down syndrome in the United States and abroad. And whereas through public awareness, the Village of Key Biscayne celebrates the hard work and progress made by parents, family members, friends, self-advocates, medical professionals, researchers, educators, and many non-for-profit organizations all over the world. And whereas the Village of Key Biscayne joins the United Nations and over 191 other countries in celebrating and valuing the lives and equality of people with Down syndrome, wherefore I, Myra Pena-Lindsay, the Mayor of Key Biscayne, do hereby proclaim March 21st as World Down Syndrome Day here in the Village of Key Biscayne. And I understand that we have a special resident who brought this to our attention, and we are so glad to support it, Milagros Ponce de Leon, and you will be speaking, but thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
may I make a quick comment?
Yes.
We just moved 10D in the special presentations, but it will be before public comments. Is there a chance that we will also discuss this again after public comments, or have public comments during that on that issue?
We can have public, if with your indulgence, public comments right now, if that is what you think
Yeah,
would
that-
be.
It's fine.
That'd be great.
Can I ask a quick question about the
Yes.
proclamation? Is there a way that we could adopt something to an event or something to just to help highlight this? Go ahead, Alice.
There is something, and I think that when Milagros speaks, she can
Okay.
tell us how we can acknowledge the day.
Great.
So council, we will start with public comments, and our first speaker is Milagros Ponce de Leon.
Good evening. 455 Woodcrest Road.
Thank you.
Well, I'm Milagros Ponce de Leon. I'm always emotional when I come here in front. Before addressing the Down Syndrome Day, I wanted to thank all of you Congress members for the support we had for the Young Athletes Program that was approved last year and that it started running this year. It's been so far very successful for a starting program. There was always room for improvement, and Coach Patlin has been awesome. And the other David, that I don't know his last name, from the community center, has also been very supportive. We're starting in the 5th week, and it's been awesome. Now, the second thing that I wanted to address, and I had written my speech, and everything is written in the resolution. So I wanted to go into the particular details about the campaign we're running. It's called Rock Your Socks. We took this idea from the state of Delaware. We have permission to use all their logos and all the stuff they have provided, like the name. But we are running a campaign that we're going to do it at schools. We've already contacted all the schools in Key Biscayne. Already 5 have approved the campaign. It's called Rock Your Socks. We have done some flyers with the help of graphic designers that are friends. Here is going to be sending. We have the six pictures of 6 of the kids with Down syndrome. We thought we only had 6. Then we discovered Rainer, who is the son of Rainer Barani here. He's 52 years old, and he lives here in the Key. We hadn't met him before, and we were very happy to have that addition. And we know there are 3 or more. We haven't been able to reach out to them. We don't know where actually they live on the Key, but we know there are more people on the Key. So we are advocating for the right of these kids with Down syndrome, their inclusion, and celebrating their lives on March 21st, that it's World Down Syndrome Day, describing the uniqueness of the triplication of the chromosome number 21. So it's 3 21s. That's why the day has been chosen, so we cannot move it. It's an international date. Some of the details that Major had mentioned, one of 691 kids are born with Down syndrome, and the life expectancy of people with Down syndrome in 1983 was 25 years, and now it's 60. And that's because people have started to include them, not institutionalize them. They're being stimulated with therapies and have been included and embraced. And it has more than doubled their life expectancy in less than 30 years. And we believe that all these people with Down syndrome have lots of talents that they can share with the community, and not including them in our workforce is a way of wasting the talents that are out there. And I'm not only referring to having them bag items in a supermarket. I really think they have more capabilities and talent than just doing very simple stuff. What we are requesting from our council is that the recognition that, thanks in advance, or thank you for including that. We would like, it's called Rock Your Socks. So we are requesting all people in the community, students, teachers, staff members, civil servants, public servants, to wear crazy, brightly bold color socks, mismatched socks. So if they ask you why you're wearing, you have an opportunity to explain, I'm wearing it because I celebrate Down syndrome, or to raise awareness. We have also done posters. This was a flyer. We have also done posters that we sent already to be printed. And we have, we are not affiliated to any organization, so this is all just local parents. All goes there, that we have, we started with this and the help of people that just love our kids, and we are happy, for all the assistance they've given us. We're also, we will update, we are requesting all teachers to, to make a picture of all the crazy socks, and we're going to be sharing that through social media. We're going to be creating a Twitter account. We're going to be tweeting all the support to all residents. We also plan to request the local business supports. We are going to be asking to place these posters on the windows for display. And we have also reached out to the Chamber of Commerce, because in the future we would like to include all the kids with special needs, all the people with special needs, to be included in the workforce. So that's a second project, or a third project, but we plan on pushing forward. And we would also love if we could advertise in the marquee at the entrance of the Key Biscayne, the community, saying that it's Down Syndrome Awareness Day. And finally, in the afternoon of March 21st, it wasn't our idea, but people started reaching to us like, you need to do something else, just apart from the Rock Your Socks. And they offered, why don't we gather at the Village Green and we just celebrate? So we're just going to celebrate. So everybody's invited there. Some friends have offered to do dance classes, like dancing, and include all the kids. So some art, some gym, some dancing, some performances from the kids of St. Agnes. So that's what we were requesting, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mike Davey, again. Yeah, I know.
Mike Davey, 50 Ocean Lane Drive. I was going to speak about permit fees, but I've spoken to Sergio, and I feel I'm comfortable that it sounds promising going forward. I know you're all going to have some questions for him, so hopefully you can get everything ironed out and move in the right direction. I am going to speak about in-service distributions. I know that some folks are concerned about them up there on the dais. Let me just say that if we don't allow for in-service distributions, which is we have an employee who's reached the end of their tenure as a pensioned employee, and they now are entitled to, here he comes. If they then are allowed to start receiving their pension benefits, there's some concerns that, well, maybe we shouldn't allow them to do that while they stay on the job. I think that's wrong. I think what we're going to wind up doing is we're going to de-incentivize good employees that we want to keep here. If we're saying, no, you can't draw on your pension, but you can get a salary, perhaps at a slightly higher rate than we were going to offer to somebody else, they're still losing that benefit that they're entitled to. And it has nothing to do with being retired. It's simply a benefit that they've earned. It's called a retirement benefit. But let's be honest, if you reach the end of a contract, you're entitled, do you not understand? I'm sorry. If you understand what the pension is, right?
I understand everything you're saying.
Okay, well, you're giving me a confused look. What I'm saying is,
Processing your.
okay, my point is, if we don't allow in-service distributions, we're going to lose good employees. And if our commitment is to have the best employees possible, we should be looking at ways that we can keep them. Right now, we've got one employee, we've got the police chief, we're talking about keeping, and I think we should be considering doing that. But it shouldn't be for just him, it should be for any time we've got an employee that we want to keep that is going to be entitled to receive a pension benefit. So keep this in mind. We're not losing anything. Where in fact, we would be paying more. If you want to talk about giving somebody a salary but paying them a little bit more, why would we want to pay extra money? Why would we want to do that when they can receive their pension benefit at the same time they're drawing a salary? We're not giving anything up. We're not paying any more money into the system. It just makes sense for you all to allow for in-service distributions. I hope I was clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Nancy Ellisberg.
Nancy Ellisberg, 177 Ocean Lane Drive, apartment 1111 here in Key Biscayne. 20 years ago, this week in March, Don woke up with a funny feeling in his jaw. We were fairly new snowbirds, did not have a doctor down here, and so I called 911. In a very short order, Marcos Osorio showed up with the crew, asked important questions, and did an EKG and discovered that Don was having a heart attack. Most people don't know that a pain in your jaw that is different from a toothache can mean a heart attack. They immediately took charge. They were in immediate consultation with the emergency room at the hospital. They asked the appropriate TPA questions. They stabilized things, got him to the hospital, asked TPA questions again while the ambulance was going, and they were still in contact with the hospital. And all of those actions made it possible for the hospital to know that we were coming and what the problem was. And so all of those actions not only saved his life, but saved the quality of his life. And I would like to say that 20 years ago, Don was 59. And as I look around the room and see everybody with the ages that they are, nobody ever knows what tomorrow is going to bring. Take care of yourself. You have a pain in the jaw. Do not drive yourself to the hospital. Do not let anybody else drive you to the hospital. You will miss out on the phone, first of all, the correct analysis of what's happening to you. You will miss out on the constant phone conversation between the rescue squad and the hospital so that they are prepared for you when you come. And we are forever grateful.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Our next speaker is Ignacio Segurola.
Good evening, Council. Ignacio Segurola, 881 Ocean Drive, 18E. I'd like to talk to you about the building and zoning fees. First off, I'd like to start with a clarification. Each one of you was forwarded a letter by the condo presidents, of which I'm the vice president. I want to clarify that that letter was in response to information we received last week regarding what the building and zoning department's wish list was for the permit fees. It was not, we did not have at the time the information about what the consultants are going to propose here tonight. I have reviewed, and as well as some of the other members of the condo association have reviewed what the consultants are going to propose. And to be honest, I find it very refreshing, and I find it to be very spot on with regard to what the council asked the consultants the last time they were here in front of you. There are only a couple of questions that I would have for clarification that I guess are going to do the proposal later on. Specifically, what does the 2.3% of the value of the contract, what would that apply to? Maybe I just don't know enough about construction, but I like the square footage approach, as we've said many times. I understand the percentage might be necessary, but I believe that just needs to be a very detailed list so everybody knows what's going on. And number two, I believe I know the answer, but just another clarification. Are the fees that are being proposed that will be collected, are those fees directly correlated to the statutorily allowable activities that you can charge for, or is it for the building department as a whole? I think it's pretty clear that you cannot collect fees for the building department as a whole. It has to be for activities regarding the enforcement of the building code. Besides that, according to the projections that they put in their analysis, you're always going to have a small surplus. I believe that's natural. It's up to the council to decide how big that surplus has to be. But I believe the consultants are a good step in the right direction. I don't know if it's 100% cooked turkey or not, but I believe we're going the right way. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Antonio Camé.
Thank you, Dr. Don.
Okay. Our next speaker is Bruno Ramos.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bruno Elias Ramos. I'm resident at 200 Cape Florida Drive, Key Biscayne, for 20 years now. I'm also the president at the Shotokan World Karate Do Federation. I sent the letter out January 29th to the mayor, who put me in contact with Todd. We're hosting on May 19th, it's a one-day event, hosting our international tournament. And we respectfully requested the use of the gymnasium and some of the meeting spaces upstairs for warm-up and like a green room. With me here today is Jimmy Wong, one of our founder, Claudia de la Cruz, a lifelong friend, and I live on the Key because of them, by the way. Carlos and Claudia talked me into coming, and Sandra Bonnell. Many of the members actually live here on the Key. We have probably 4 or 5 pages of a small sign-in sheet that we sent around that are members and residents of the Key. Jimmy has taught here for over 30 years. My kids went with him. I've trained with him for 15 years. I've been training since college. It's a traditional form of martial arts. There's no weapons. There's no full contact. It's more forms, point system, etc. So Todd asked me to come during the public session and speak to you about this, to request the gymnasium. So we're here to respectfully make that request. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next,
What is the date?
May 19th.
May 19th.
What day of week is it?
It's a Saturday.
Saturday from 8 to 8.
Most of the folks are coming in from out of town. They're staying off the Key hotels. They'll be just shuttled in and out. But the residents that do live here will benefit from having it here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Fernando Romero.
Hello, Fernando Romero, 121 Crandon Boulevard, apartment 457. Thank you all for listening to us. There's something that I wanted to say, and it's on regarding what this group of wonderful people, moms, said before about Down syndrome. My uncle lived 82 years in his life, and he had Down syndrome. And he was a very successful man, a very happy man. He grew up in Spain, and he passed on in Spain. And it's interesting the awareness that exists in countries like Spain or Italy or France when it comes to Down syndrome, and the inclusion that exists. And I wish that this country would have the same levels of inclusion for some people that just have, a slight difference on a gene, and that's it. And they tend to be the most wonderful and the sweetest people in the entire world. So I really thank you guys for doing what you're doing. And on behalf of the Key Biscayne Water Sports Association, which I am here to represent, we have 100 volunteers. So you just need to get in touch with us and we'll help. Going back to the Water Sports Association, just coming here to report, first of all, that we conducted last week beach cleanup, It was quite successful. Regardless of the fact that the truck had passed and picked up a lot of garbage, we still picked up about 200 pounds of garbage. We took some pictures and we sent them to the Islander News, and they actually published them, and it was a very successful campaign that we endeavored for, and that we're going to repeat in 1 month. So now, as far as the Key Biscayne Water Sports Association and the whole thing with the kiteboarding, I just want again to report another week of successful enforcement of the rules. We continue showing quite a bit of strict enforcement to the regulations that were presented to our members. 100% of the members now are registered, and 92% are certified level 3 IKO riders. The other ones are just getting there, through training. We have submitted a quote to the council from an insurance company for an umbrella policy, and I believe that you have the details, and we are willing to work with you so you can give us guidance on what to do. And we have just a couple of requests for the council today. One is that whatever fee is imposed to the practice of non-motorized water sports on the beach is reasonable and adequate to the level of service the village is willing to provide. So we're asking. Number two is that we ask for the possibility to be regarded as any other sports organization in Key Biscayne, such as the soccer program. We are applying for nonprofit status, and we will remain available for questions, suggestions, and advice to the village council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Don Ellisberg.
Thank you. Don Ellisberg, 177 Ocean Lane Drive. I don't know whether I get the second bite at the apple during all the discussion of the permitting, but I wanted to just address one point as we get into this, and Ignacio, I think, got to it. Our letter was, and I think Tony will also focus on it. We have two proposals before the council, and that's what's confused us. You have a consultant that has recommended how this process should work, and I think, as Ignacio said, we look at that as progress. We also have a proposal from the village manager, which we believe is a step backwards to the old days of profit light. And the point we want to make here is that the proposal of the consultant is, the proposal of the manager is 180 degrees opposite from that of the consultant. And while we have a 90-some-odd page report that I was able to request yesterday to look at, we have nothing by way of any analysis from the village manager's office as to why you want to turn the consultant's recommendation on its head. And we will get to that, obviously, during the discussion. But I wanted to bring the focus of what our concern is early on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Antonio Camejo.
Good evening. Antonio Camejo, 151 Crandon Boulevard. Along the lines, first, I'd like to thank everyone in the council who's worked with management to tackle what is a really difficult question and a very difficult process to put together a fee schedule. Again, we received the consultant study with not enough time to really look at it, but it seems to have, based on a cursory overview, much of the philosophy that we had been in favor of. The key issue I think that we need to address, and perhaps when they make their presentation they can address this, and that is the percentage part of the fee for excuse me for renovations and improvements. when that would apply. If it applies across the board, that is problematic. Because again, we go back to the concept of doing a $10,000 kitchen or a $50,000 kitchen. It makes no sense to have inspectors essentially carry out the same tasks and have two different fees for two different households, depending on how much money they're spending to renovate, because the process is the same. There are times when a percentage may be the most intelligent way to approach a problem, and we're fine with that if it's clarified when that would be used, but it should not be across the board, because then that becomes problematic. I do want to congratulate the people who worked on this, that we did equalize the issue between single-family homes, renovations, and renovations in condominiums. I think we have a level playing field. That's wonderful. That's what everybody wanted. I think we still have some possible distortion when we go between square footage and fees. And if we can get those things addressed, then I think we're going to be in a much better position to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Claudia de la Cruz.
Good evening. Claudia de la Cruz, 460 South Mashta Drive. I'm here on my behalf and also my husband's behalf to support Bruno's petition to bring the karate here to Key Biscayne. We feel it's a unique opportunity for our village and the population, both old adults and younger, to witness this international championship here in Key Biscayne. We've been to other of their events, and they are incredibly organized. They bring enough people to make this a very professional, organized event, and we're just lucky to be able, hopefully, to have it here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ed London.
I think so.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to speak, I think you call it in-service distribution. I refer to it really as deferred compensation and an annuity. When someone engages a union contract or any other kind of contract, they're deferring some of their compensation, which they would normally get paid, to future compensation. And the village, on the other hand, becomes a company that's going to provide an annuity. So under certain terms and conditions, when they spend X amount of years, contribute X amount of money, we're going to give them a defined benefit. So in effect, at the end of that term, whatever that term might be, they expect to get X amount of dollars per year for life, or if they die sooner, for a minimum of 10 years. So the question then becomes, are they entitled to that money when they max out? Under the old system, a firefighter could get 100% of his salary at the age of 48, assuming he started at 20. Under the new one, he'd have to be 53 to get 90%. And I understand what you're proposing now, he'd have to be 45 years old to get 75%. So after that point in time, there's a good chance that they would be what I call maxed out and would not want to work any further. Now, why would you want that to happen? One of two reasons. You want to get rid of them because you can hire somebody less expensive. And fine, that gives you a good idea. You get rid of them, you can't collect. Because it'd be foolish for most people to keep working and not collecting what's entitled to them unless they can't, because at 45 or 48 or 53, most people are in the prime of their life and can get another job somewhere else. So, assuming you want to keep these people, they're qualified people, they're competent people, they're good people, they've been great employees, what you're doing by saying you can't have an in-service distribution, you're really saying, hey, you know what? Go somewhere else. Now, maybe that's what you want. So, what I would propose is something as follows. At that point in time, when they maxed out, and they might want to have in-service distribution, they would basically resign their job, and then you'd have the opportunity of rehiring them. So you would hire the ones back you wanted to continue, they would get their service distribution, the other ones would leave. But anyway, that would be fair, because what you're doing is not fair of not giving in-service distribution when they're qualified for it. Now, is there an economic benefit? to you not to do it? Yes. Would you save a lot of money? Yes. By getting rid of them, hiring younger people, less money. But that's a philosophical thing. That's a management thing. That's what you have to decide. But from a strictly financial or compensation, deferred compensation annuity, they should be entitled to in-service distribution. Thank you. Any questions?
No. Our next speaker is Armando Nunez.
Hi, good evening, I'm sorry. Armando Nunez, 265 Glen Ridge Road and 425 Grapeview Drive. First of all, I guess I got to start on the good foot. Thank you for all you do. And I know it's definitely not there. It's not an easy thing to sit up there and take grief from everybody, you know, because I sat out here for 19 years and I heard it all and I heard everybody take it. I came tonight to support really my wife and her group with having the tournament at the rec center. They want to have a karate tournament. I'm sure that you guys know about that. I think it's probably a really good thing. You know, over the years, we've let so many people come and use that gym, you know, whether we wanted to or not, or whether we had the space or not. You know, and this is an organization I've watched my wife for the last 9 years have a passion for this sport. You know, she's a second-degree black belt. You know, we've gone to San Francisco. She won the world championship for women in the United States. You know, I mean, I lived through her and I watch her with her sensei. And, you know, she has a passion for it. So it kind of grows on me. So, you know, she asked me tonight, will I come and speak? You know, I know all of you. And I know that, you know, I know scheduling, Todd, you know, it's difficult. You know, but maybe it's one of those days that, hey, you know, we split the gym in two, you know, like they do for volleyball or something, and they get half or whatever. I don't know all the details, so I apologize, but I want to just speak in their behalf, you know, and tell you my wife's passion, because to me, that's the most important part. You know, I've been a resident here for a real long time. This is my home, and this is my wife. And, you know, this is our home, you know, so, you know, if you all would just consider it, you know, it'd be nice, it'd be a privilege. And I think it could be something that might be able to happen again, you know. It might not go perfect, you know, because I've been to a few. We went to Punta Cana one time and, wow, that was definitely different. You know, it might not be perfect the first time, but I know that with the group that's behind it, they'll get better. And the event will get better. And it'll bring people to the key, you know, and that's what we want. We want to bring people to the key. You know, I got a house to sell, you know, you know, just bring me rich people. And it's just, you know, but I think it's something good. You know, we brought all those bicyclists, we brought all those green things out there that are trash out there on the streets and parked everywhere. You know, I think we could probably give them a shot, you know, and it's something for you to consider. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, that concludes our public comments. We will start with our special presentation.
The next item, I believe, Mr. Manager, would you like the presentation by Glenn Waldman
Yes, ma'am, please.
from the Youth Athletics Advisory Board? Mr. Waldman?
Did we skip? Jen? Yeah, we moved that.
Good evening.
Good
Glenn
evening.
Waldman, 240 Woodcrest Road. Thank you for your time. I come here tonight as the chairman of the Youth Athletic Advisory Board. I'm joined by two board members, Ken Cotto and Paul Zuccarini back there. And I had sent a letter to all of the council members back on February 12th to discuss 3 issues. tonight. The first one, which I think is the most important, pertains to taking what we have now, which is an underutilized facility at the KBCS school, the basketball court, which the rims stink and the court is old and doesn't work very well, and turning it into something that we can utilize to further give opportunities to our kids for sports. And I know Jen and Joanna are here tonight, who runs both our volleyball program and our basketball program. And the problem is, obviously, since it's primarily an indoor sport, they don't have much use. We have a certain window which we have an opportunity to do it, and that runs out because there's so much we have to schedule within the gym. If we were able to do this, and can we put up a rendering, the first one on the board? Can you pop that up there? You want me to do it? Thank you. Oh. Maybe not. No, let's give it a second. Okay. While we do that, I'll talk a little bit more, perhaps. There we go. So this is a rendering of what we're talking about to put behind this. Again, this is right next to the fields. This would abut the school. The school is very in favor of this. This would also obviously help our kids who go to the school there, because when it rains, they can still get outside and have an opportunity to exercise as opposed to being inside, which is they have to do now. And what we're envisioning is that we would have this structure which would be lighted. And so we would be able to take our volleyball program, where our girls, we have a wait list every year. We turn away Key Biscayne girls because we can't fit them all in the gym. We'd be able to run a program. We'd be able to have a travel program, a competitive program, and likewise for basketball, we'd be able to do it more than the 2 or 3 months that we can do it now. So this is a rendering. We had 2 proposals, one by Paul Abbott, who has done a lot of work here in the village, who's the contractor here. And his is, I think, $712,000. We have that somewhere as well, which is what the cost would be from soup to nuts, at least at this juncture, in order to build this structure. And maybe not. Technology. And you got that as an attachment to my letter, I believe. And this is we had another estimate of $1.4 million, which is kind of crazy, but Paul Abbott has worked out here, and I think he's reliable, and people know who he is and what he does. So we would ask you to go ahead and greenlight this. We think this is critically important, and the goal, if it's something that would be greenlighted, is we'd love to have this in place by September, October, since that's when we start our volleyball season, and we would run it in basketball season. We'd be able to run it thereafter. And currently, we have 400 kids in our basketball and our volleyball program, and they'd be able to continue to play sports. Yes, go ahead.
Can you scroll that? Because I did not see that attachment. It's not in my packet.
All right.
Thank you, Glenn, and I'm sorry for interrupting.
That's okay.
Glenn, can you tell us what the surface of the bottom would be? Is it concrete?
I think that it's going to be concrete base, and then there's going to be something over it,
For
which
the
is
volleyball players.
yeah,
they
it's not
couldn't-
going to be concrete. And what they're also going to do, I'm sorry, should I keep going, Mara?
That's the
Oh, that's the other one.
Already
Let's get the one we like.
volleyball at St. Agnes on the concrete.
That's rubberized,
Got it.
isn't it?
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. They would redo the entire court, and also, because the basketball, they would be adjustable, because right now they're not. So we could have, for the different kids at the different levels, we'd be able to utilize this, and we'd have 2 full courts under there, as well as for volleyball, you'd have at least 2 full courts. So it's something we need. I mean, this is a facility that we don't use because we can't, because it's no good. And all of a sudden, this would be something that'd be good for everybody. So I could go on, but I won't. If anybody has any questions for me relative to this, yeah, Allison.
I have a question about
Sure.
lighting
Yes,
and the impact of the surrounding houses.
great question. The lighting would be inside.
Okay.
So it's not out, the lighting would be inside the interior, and where that is located is really far removed from any of the houses in the area. So I really don't think it would be an issue at all. In fact, we're running lights right now on that
huge light
on the
also,
huge
yeah.
lights, which are about as inefficient as you get, and they have that. Whereas this would be very focused, and it would really just be on the court. So I don't think we'd have any issues whatsoever with regard to lighting. Does anybody else have any questions relative to this issue?
Noise?
Noise?
If we're scheduling late at night? I mean, what do you see the scheduling time?
Well, we don't really play late anyway with our sports now. I think most of our sports end by 9 o'clock as it is.
They're
And
playing with
again,
lights now.
We're playing
Well,
out.
but you wouldn't be playing, basketball's much louder than baseball or something. I mean,
Yeah, but again, it's where it's situated. You know, it is a little bit removed, and I don't think the noise would be that great.
It's
I
more
don't
in the
think it's
center. It's in the center of the land, the property. It's not on the edge.
Well, yeah, it's the center or further that way, right? It really is kind of removed from all the houses on all 3 sides of the building. Frank?
The design causes me to think about height relative to basketball and volleyball. Adequate, I assume it's adequate.
That was the issue that we talked about, and we're going to make sure that it will be. There may be an adjustment that absolutely, it makes no sense if volleyball are going to be hitting the roof, and same thing with basketballs.
Yeah, and then also, again, it's a design question, but, rain comes horizontally too, so how to maximize your kind of internalized protection and still keep it affordable.
That's the issue. We don't. That's why it's open structure, so it's not cost prohibitive. So that's the concern. Obviously, we can go back and tinker with it if we have the approval, but that is a concern, and I understand it. But we're trying to at least have something we know that the kids can get out there and play.
Right.
And when it's really inclement weather, maybe not, but generally, yeah.
In noise and nuisance, this will bleed into different hours, but in all the years, there's never been a complaint from Glen Ridge that I've ever heard, or the surrounding streets. And the fields are used not just for baseball and softball, but they're used extensively.
Raul doesn't live there anymore.
Exactly.
Well, he hasn't closed yet on his house, but he will soon.
No, he's already moved.
I know, but he still owns it.
Now, it's
But that'll be over
possible
soon.
that Eric Lang might complain, but we'll speak.
We'll take care of Eric, yeah. Does anybody else have any questions
I
on
just
this?
have one other question.
Go ahead.
This, as it's drawn and the way that you want to be able to use it, it looks like maybe the configuration of the space changes a little bit. Does the footprint expand?
I don't
from
believe it
what's
does.
currently there?
I don't believe it does. And again, the school, Mr. Patlin was supposed to be here tonight. I don't think he is. But the school is very gung-ho about this as well, which will also benefit our children who go to the elementary school as well as the middle school there.
And you could do karate in there, too.
And we could do karate events there. So it's not as good as the indoor facility, but, So we're very, very much, we work very hard on this, and we think this is critically important in order to enhance the experience for our kids. So we'd ask you to support it and green light this, and let's see if we can get it done for the end of the summer where we could actually start to use it, yes.
Did you analyze how many more children could be served by adding these courts?
Well, if you understand that volleyball, first off, right now, we have a limit of how many?
120. 180. 180.
180. We're up to 180. And that's it. They play 3 months, and then they leave the island if they can to play in other leagues. Here we'd be able to have these girls play all year round, and we'd be able to actually have more with the competitive nature of it. Likewise, basketball is a 3-month window, and then they're done. It's 200 kids, Jen? So I don't know how we're going to work it, per se, in terms of, the travel teams, but there is always a clamoring going on these days for the kids in almost all sports. They want to play more than just a little bit. Soccer has that. It's become a year-round thing, and all the sports seem to be that way, and we can't provide that for these sports because we don't have a facility.
So your goal is more about providing longer seasons, not about getting larger programs?
It's both. Okay. It's both, because we could also run volleyball during the volleyball season. We could run it there as well as in the gym. We could absolutely. We could increase kids. We don't have a waiting list as much in basketball, but the girls' sports have always been underserved here because we haven't had as many girls who want to participate. And when you have a sport where you have to turn away girls because you just have to cut it off, that kills us. And that's something we really want to
But it's also basketball.
Yeah.
No, I get that. I was just trying to understand.
If we're going to stick on girls, the girls' basketball this year expanded so much that there's their own league.
There you go. And this would be something
Warriors
that.
are in first place.
Right, that we could. Really?
And the game's tomorrow night.
There you go.
I have a question. If we decide to do this, do we have to go through a formal RFP process? Or
Yes.
we can just jump
Yes.
on
No, we
what
have
they already have?
And we have to talk to the school district. This is
Okay.
just,
So
we're
this is a
just
process.
spitballing
This
right
is a
now.
process. This is not
Yes.
just jumping on.
Unfortunately, right.
This is a
700,000 or
concept.
whatever. Okay.
It's just a concept.
But we could, conceivably, we could piggyback off of the district's preferred vendors. That's a possibility. In fact, that's a likelihood. Right, right.
Is there any other questions I can entertain or answer relative to this particular issue? Okay. Can I move on to issue 2?
Please.
Ask to one thing about the structure.
We're going off script, kids.
Jennifer Pema, I run the basketball program, 101 Crandon Boulevard. 2 key points. One, I teach PE, I've taught PE, and a structure like this would help tremendously because it gets so hot out there that the kids need some covered space for PE. They need covered space, not just when it's raining, but for the heat. They need to be able to get away from the heat. Number 2 is Mass is constantly they have terrible facilities for the volleyball and basketball, and they're using our gym it would also maybe alleviate them to be able to use here until something is permanently built there. Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 2, if I may.
Then you got somebody wanting to,
Joanna,
Someone asked just a question regarding.
Come on, come on, Joanna.
courage.
You can do it.
How are you? Joanna Aguirre, 711 Crandon Boulevard. Someone asked a question regarding how many more girls we'd be able to, I think Katie asked. We wouldn't be able to play games here, I don't think, but we would be able to put at least 4 more teams to practice there at a time, each team taking half a court. So that's already easily 40 more girls at a time on the court. Games would still have to be at the community center, but unless you want to give us another gym, which would be great. But this would be.
Could we, Joanna, why couldn't we play games there if we did it right, if we built it right? What is it missing?
Well, I don't know enough about the flooring.
Yeah.
The flooring here. Obviously, as you know, in volleyball, girls have to dig and they go to the floor. If it's not a sliding type of surface, which I don't know if they offer that for exterior grounds, there could be injuries, ripping of equipment, just a number of things. So for practice, I think it would be fine. You just don't work on those type of things unless the flooring, I don't know enough about it, but unless the flooring.
We can work through that, see what we can do, see if we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody. Okay, thank you. The second issue that, that I'd like to address deals with adding fees, if you will, to our current fee structure in order to try to raise additional revenue for the village. We were asked to consider that, and that's something, and I came before you a number of months ago saying we were trying to work on it, and we have. And somebody had thrown around the number of $100,000 that they asked us to see if we could raise. And we looked at it, we did the math, and basically the only way that we could do that would be to have a pass-through to our children and raise the amount of money that everybody has to pay for our sports, which to us was not acceptable. We've worked very, very hard to make our sports as good as we can, at the same time making them as affordable as possible for our residents. So that to us was a difficult thing to do, because when you tell each sport that you have to raise X dollars, and these days most of the sports are revenue neutral, we get budgets and there's not a lot of fat there. We didn't think that that was something that would work. So we went back to the drawing board, and what we came up with was a way to try to kind of meet you a little bit towards halfway. And what we've come up with, if there's going to be any taxation whatsoever, and again, we are not in favor of that, and the board has voted against it. However, to the extent that there needs to be something, the proposal that we've come up with deals with taxing essentially non-residents who play here on Key Biscayne.
Isn't that already being done? That was done.
Marginally, but we're going to do it now. It's across.
Wasn't enforcing it.
I'm sorry?
It wasn't being enforced.
It wasn't enforced consistently across all sports. It was not on all sports. When we looked at it, it was done on some of the sports. Now it's going to be on all sports, including adult soccer. And what we're doing is we're going to tax essentially 30%. There'll be a 30% increase in the cost for all non-residents to participate in our sports, play on our fields, play in our gym. And we're very comfortable with that if we have to do something, because they have the benefit of coming out here and playing, and if they don't want to play, then don't play.
And the taxpayers are already subsidizing, so
It's absolutely we are.
that was the issue. It's not about generating fees. It's about, equalizing subsidies or. But
Well, I'm
like,
not.
how many kids do we have that are out of pocket fee that are participating?
We have a, help me, please. We have a chart.
Thank you.
And basically,
Basketball, it's not that many. It's maybe 10 kids. They already any programs where the kids pay through the rec center are already paying that 30%.
That's what I thought.
So basketball, it's 30% more. I'd say maybe 10, 15 kids out of 190 kids. It's not a ton, but they already pay. So I think he's talking about programs that aren't directly paid through the rec center.
I thought they all had to pay through the rec center.
again, they're all, everybody's paying through.
And adult soccer.
All right, here, if you look at the top here, we
I
have,
think there's an issue
it shows
as
us-
kids get older, that some of the non-residents are mass students which come, and then sometimes, I think there's a feeling that as you have a disparity in fees, that it kind of adds to this divisiveness.
There may be a chilling effect to some extent, and soccer was very concerned because in their higher leagues, in their eldest leagues, a decent percentage of their children are off island, and those programs are important because we need to have our older kids having something to do. So there are some concerns, but they're going to deal with it by raising money, by having events, and I think to the extent that they want the kids to be here, they'll find a way. So I'm confident it'll get done. And we expect that we would raise $25,000 a year to start if we put into place what we're talking about relative to this 30% bump in the costs on the non-residents. And if you look at it, you've got approximately, out of 1,294 kids, you've got 138 non-residents is what you have on that sheet. And I can pass that around if you need that. So that, to the extent, again, you want to do something, this is what we would recommend. We don't want to do anything more because it would impact our own residents, and we don't think that that's appropriate because we think our sports are properly priced right now, and we don't want to raise the prices if we can avoid it. All right, last item. Any questions on that? Anybody? Yes, Katie.
Can you clarify for me, because you said some sports are doing it, some sports aren't doing it, and is that money coming back to the village? What exactly is happening now, and what are you looking to put in place?
Todd could speak better to it than I could as to what has happened in the past. I am relatively confident that it's been not uniformly imposed. I'm not sure where the money went, whether it was plowed back into the sports or otherwise. But if we do this, it is clear that the money will come directly to the village. And it will, again, it's about $25,000 is what we're talking in revenue.
So this may actually clear up things since there's some inconsistency? If we were to do nothing, what happens?
You'd have inconsistency.
We have an inconsistency. So the answer to your question is yes. This will make it uniform. This will make it for all the sports, and everybody's going to be treated the same.
Well, you don't have to raise the fees and make it consistent.
Right, we could lower them back to the same, but again, I think that for the privilege to play here on Key Biscayne, people should pay more if they're not Key Biscayne residents.
And by the way, it's done in so many other municipalities. Coral Gables does that.
Don't disagree.
Pinecrest does that. So that it's because the concept is the people who live here are paying the taxes that are actually supporting the fees. So if you don't, you're perfectly welcome, but we shouldn't be subsidizing you. You should pay your way as cheaply as possible, but pay your way.
Although Allison raises a point, and I just want to put a finer point on this. Not a decision, but an observation. Mast is our high school.
Yes.
The non-Key Biscayne kids that go to Mast, should they be treated same as Key Biscayne kids that are in the athletic program? It's a question. It's a policy question.
Right, and I think that's something for you all to make a decision on, and however you decide, obviously, we'll implement based on what you decide.
We're going to need to know how many, and
There's
I
a
mean,
lot of
this
other
is, yeah,
issues.
this is,
There's a lot of
it's
issues.
just a starting point.
Well, you asked for us, and we have worked very hard to come here and tell you this is what we think you should do, obviously subject to some fine tuning.
Some of those kids are playing there because they're needed for the older teams and such. So
for our kids to not make the team and still be subsidized.
yeah, that's not happening.
Good.
That's not happening as much as that's not the issue anymore.
It used to be.
It used to be the problem. We have quotas now, which we're enforcing on all of our levels except the very highest level because again, we need to let the kids play. All right, last item. I don't want to take too much more time. The last item is very simple. When this Youth Athletic Advisory Board was created in 2008, it was called just that, the Youth Athletic Advisory Board. We have asked that it be changed to the Village Athletic Advisory Board because frankly, we're overseeing all sports when we should. And when it comes to things like adult soccer, which we need to make sure with the fields and the prices and everything works, it's not within the charge in theory of the way that this thing was written. So we would ask that you simply change it so it is the Village Athletic Advisory Board because that's what we're overseeing and that's what we should be overseeing and making recommendations to this council. And that's the last point that we'd ask for.
Thank you.
The history of the KBAC was not youth-oriented. It was just KBAC.
It was the athletic club for the village. That is correct. Exactly correct.
Makes a lot of sense.
But we didn't deal with adults.
I'm not so sure if the adult softball was under was that under us or not?
Softball might have been. Oh, that's right. That was your gig.
No, the softball teams were completely different.
In any event, at this point, they're all should be under
I agree
our
100%.
umbrella. I think that's best because we can be consistent that way.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do we need
the
to,
whole
do we
board.
need to propose that, or do we need to, how do you want it?
We need to bring it back as a discussion item
All right.
and take action.
And then write a reading or two.
The one point of feedback you might follow up on is if there's a surface that's suitable for volleyball, an outdoor surface, or a half outdoor surface,
Yes.
let's know about it.
Absolutely. We'll look into that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your
Appreciate it.
time and you guys, your dedication.
Yeah.
Thank you, board members,
Yeah.
for being here.
That's right.
Our next item, please.
Yes, Mr. Manager, would you like to have the permit fee analysis or your discussion items?
No, the permit fee analysis.
Thank you for your patience, and we're happy to have you.
Mayor and council, thank you. As was stated earlier this evening, we've got the vendor that was hired by the village to consult and guide us on the fee permitting process. Mr. Dios is here this evening with us, and please, we'll turn the evening over to you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. George Duyos with JRD and Associates. So I appeared before you on October 24th at your council meeting where JRD had developed through analysis a proposed building permit fee schedule. Our analysis yielded a recommendation of a uniform fee of 2.35% of the value of construction for all permit fees across the village. You basically sent us back to the drawing board that night, and we went back to the drawing board and were able to analyze data that we didn't have on our first analysis, which is when the council amended your fees in February of 2017. The village started collecting square footage information on all permits. So we didn't have that information the first time we did our analysis. We did on the second go-around. So we had 9 months of data, permit data, where we had square footage. So we were able to collect that data, scrub it a little bit, because we did find some permits for which there was square footage that should not have been charged on square footage. So we did some scrubbing, and we basically were able to develop a fee schedule that is a hybrid, which is what we've recommended and proposed to the village, which is $1.30 per square foot for any permit for which it has a structure with square footage. That will account for approximately 84% of your permit revenue. The other tier is a value of construction, which we're recommending at 2.30% value of construction for all other permits. So other permits such as a swimming pool, somebody wants to redo the lighting in their house, a fence, water heater, something that doesn't fit nicely into the square footage arena. So we wanted to make sure, as we did the first time, that the fees that we were proposing were legal, first of all. Cost neutral, very important. So the fees we've recommended, we've done a lot of analysis on it, are cost neutral. There is no proposed surplus. We tried to basically do a zero budget, so the revenue will equal as closely as possible the expenditures. Very importantly, especially given the dialogue that we had with the industry and with you in October, something that is fair and consistent across the board. Again, we think this is very easy to apply. So when the permit applicant fills out the permit application, if it falls under the type of permit where you can charge by square footage, that's how you apply the fee. If it doesn't, then you apply the 2.3% on value of construction. We also applied a minimum of $100. We calculated your fully burdened rate for your building division staff at approximately $90 per hour. So we established a minimum fee of $100 and a maximum fee of $25,000. Previously, you had a maximum of $10,000. As we analyzed our data based on our proposed fees, we found that 2 permits would have fallen outside that range in the nine-month period we analyzed. One was at approximately $27,000 and one was at $31,000. So we're looking for that threshold as to where a reasonable cutoff would be that would minimize revenue loss for the village. And that's basically it. You have a report. I do have some examples. I know there have been some questions of how this fee would apply. If I could just give you a couple of examples. So a condo remodel, as an example, 3,000 square feet, and this is just an assumption on my part, at $150 a square foot, that value of construction would be $450,000. But since we have square footage, we would apply the $1.30 per square foot. So that fee would be $3,900. If you took the value of construction on that one, it would be $10,350. But again, this is an example where square footage would be applicable. The kitchen remodel, again, we've heard examples, and we've heard this all the way going back almost a year when we started this process. Well, how about the $15,000 kitchen versus the $50,000 kitchen? If you're remodeling a kitchen and you have that kitchen has a square footage, let's say 200 square feet, 10 by 20 kitchen, you would apply the $1.30 per square foot, and your fee would be $260. So it wouldn't be based on value of construction. So that mitigates the issue of whether you put American Standard fixtures or 18-karat gold fixtures, because the argument is valid that the service that the building division in the village is providing is the same regardless of the value of those fixtures or appliances. That's basically it in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know there's another presentation, so I don't know how you want to. Yes, sir.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
The way we've discussed this internally is that the $1.30 a square foot, which I think is going to be $1.90 a square foot, only applies to new construction. And on your example, a remodeling of a kitchen, you can't charge based on the square footage of the kitchen because that's not new construction. That would fall under the remodeling of 2.3%. So I think there's a little confusion here.
Let me clarify. Our proposal is $1.30 per square foot on any permit that has square footage to it. And again, within a structure, not a soccer field, for instance, which is one of the permits we saw.
Yeah. Okay.
So
There's two proposals.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. So
Right.
you're explaining your proposal.
Yes.
I think staff made some changes to it.
Right. Correct.
We'll hear
I
from
have a
them.
few questions.
Please ask them, Brett.
So if we have a hybrid kind of case going on, so let's say you're remodeling your kitchen, but you're replacing a water heater on the other side of your apartment, how are we going to charge a fee on something that might have a mixture of, let's say you're remodeling your kitchen in one room and you're adding 3 lights in the master bedroom or something. How are they going to be able to
Right. Well, in that scenario, under our recommendation, the remodeling would be based on the square footage and the other work would be based on the value.
So they will put it both on the same permit and you'll basically
Right.
charge it differently on each one.
Right.
There was another question that was asked a while back. What is, to determine a cap, what would be the most amount that anybody would reasonably or should be getting charged during a permit and inspection? At what point does it just become, that's it? I mean, you're really not going to get any more service out of this amount.
I think you have to look at the value of service that's being provided. Again, we tried to take those factors into account. We looked at from no maximums to 40,000, 30,000, 20, 15, 10. We looked at all the way. There were a number of permits that came in within the $15,000 to $25,000 range that when we looked at the size of the permit, seemed conceivable that the village could be charging that amount. Again, when we hit that $25,000 plateau, we only found 2 permits that exceeded that, and one was 27, one was 31. So we felt that was a good cutoff. I mean, if you move the maximums, again, under the concept of cost neutrality, then something else is going to have to change so you don't lose money. So either the cost per square foot or the value of construction percent.
And it could be a policy decision that we make is that, do we want to be revenue neutral is the first one. And if we're okay with lowering a cap, I mean, if it's only a few projects that go over that $15,000 or whatever you think it is, there's only a few projects that do that, and we really don't see all that service is going to be used for that, we could lower the cap. We may fall short of revenue neutral. We can adjust something else, or we can just say our general funds can cover that small amount that might be missing, and that's it. And we move on from there. But I think that what's important is what's that reasonable amount. If you say it's $25,000, I think it's good to justify that for the residents here. That why is that $25,000? I know that there was a number thrown out a long time ago of $10,000. I don't know where it came from. It could have been arbitrary, could have been realistic. We don't know. Right. But it would be good to kind of find out where that threshold kind of starts to burn out. And it's just, after that, you're just paying money into the city without really receiving any added benefit in that service.
Right.
We have Luis de la Cruz, we have Katie Petras,
The,
Frank, and then Allison.
The square footage determination that you're proposing, is it under AC or complete square footage, or what is it exactly that you're proposing?
It would be under AC.
Under AC?
Yes.
That's a big difference.
And it's inclusive of all the trades, plan review, and inspections. So it's one fee.
Okay, that's a big difference, I think, because that's not what the staff is going with, another interpretation for square footage there, which is a significant amount, as you well know. Right? The other thing is 2.3% of value of construction. Now,
right.
Would you consider allowances in order to calculate the values of construction? In other words, are you going to penalize the people when they use the better materials, or are you going to, look at a design that provides for allowances and base the fee on that amount?
That's really
well, in your calculations, how did you look?
Well, our calculations were based on historical value of construction in the village. So it really depends.
Actual cost.
Whatever information is collected by the village that is put into a permit application. So that determination really has to be made by the building division as to what value of construction, how that's going to be defined. Is it going to be a means value? Are you going to take at face value what the permit applicant puts on their permit? Is the building official going to review and dispute in some cases what that value is?
Right, because the reason I asked that is because when you did your example, you took a square foot, a price per square foot, and you multiplied that out in order to determine the percentage, and price per square foot can be anything depending on the type of finishes that you put on there.
Right.
So I just wanted to know.
My example was hypothetical, but yeah, it depends how the value of construction is represented on the permit application. And as I said, in our scenario, 16% of the permit revenue would be derived from the fee that's attributed to value of construction. The rest would be based on square footage.
You done? Okay, could you speak to the two questions that some of our residents brought up, which is, do you have an idea of how we can more closely define exactly what we would be determining a value of construction? I mean, you mentioned a swimming pool, lights, things like that. Is there a way to tighten that up in our document?
Well, as we put in our report and our recommendation, it's the value of construction will apply to any structure for which square footage exists. So really anything falling outside of that, such as some of those examples that I gave.
Price per square foot will be anything that has a square foot value.
Right.
Right. And value of construction will be for water heaters, swimming pools, lights, things that you can't.
Fence, CBS wall around a property, those things that, those are linear feet, but yeah.
Okay, and then if you could just speak to how you determine what expenses could be offset by these permit revenues to make sure that we're only including the ones that are directly applicable to permitting cost within our department.
Right. So based on the numerous building permit fee studies that we have done, and speaking to city attorneys and village attorneys, and interpreting state statute 553, which basically defines the law as to what you can charge for, what you can use permit revenue for. Your building division is, all of the work that comes from the building division is directly related to permit activity. So we included the cost of the building division, as well as an indirect cost allocation from support cost to the division, which we've done in many municipalities, and it's incorporated in fees and has held up legally.
My last question is, it sounds like, I remember in your first presentation, you thought it was fiscally sound to have some small reserve, and that many municipalities do that. But if I understand what you told me here tonight, with your price per square foot and your fee structure, you have eliminated it to the best of your ability. We're basically at a zero budget with no projected surplus. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, with no projected new surplus.
Yeah, we haven't.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We haven't touched your existing surplus. We're assuming it stays.
Okay.
And you made suggestions to bring that down in other ways? Is that?
As we had highlighted in our first report in October, and we kept it the same, there are some expenses that the building division is going to incur, mostly along the technology front, that would draw down on those reserves. And so we didn't change that. Again, I think that was about $1.3 million.
Did you answer the question about the statute that one, I think Ignacio Segurola brought
I
up?
did, but I can repeat it.
Okay, I went to the back, so if you did, it's fine.
No, but yeah.
Go ahead. You can summarize it real quick.
So our understanding of State Statute 553 is that permit revenue must be related to or go toward permit-related expenses, be used for permit-related expenses. So our fees take into account all of the building division expenses, plans, examiners, permit clerks, and inspectors. That whole division is
The whole building
drives
department is.
the whole building division, right?
Yeah, planning is only partially, right? Or
What's that?
I meant zoning is only partial, or you don't.
No,
you
we
can't
didn't.
have
No,
zoning.
zoning. We developed a separate zoning fee, so we didn't touch zoning
Okay, it's separate.
with respect to that.
Okay.
Would it be easy for me just to read to you guys in the statute? It's very clear what can be used, if you want. I mean, it's, what it says is it includes the direct costs and reasonable indirect costs associated with review of building plans, building inspections, re-inspections, building permit processing, building code enforcement, and fire inspections associated with new construction. The phrase may also include training costs associated with the enforcement of the Florida Building Code and enforcement action pertaining to unlicensed contractor activity to the extent not funded by other fees. Now, it also says what's excluded. The following activities may not be funded with fees for enforcing the Florida Building Code. Number one, planning and zoning and other general government activities. Two, inspection of public buildings for a reduced fee or no fee. And three, public information requests, community functions, boards, and any other program not directly related to enforcement of the Florida Building Code. Four, enforcement and implementation of any other local ordinance, excluding validly adopted local amendments to the Florida Building Code and excluding any local ordinance directly related to enforcing the Florida Building Code.
I'm sure that's what you used as in your study, right?
Yes. I mean,
It is
we always look at the state
broad.
statute when developing these fees.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Frank?
Just
was
an
there-
open-ended question. I think the big move here is to be more clear on the price per foot, to remove the inequities that we were worried about with respect to Viking versus Whirlpool. So that's great. I'm interested in the methodology, or maybe your goal. And I know you were translating a lot of discussion the last time around. Something you said earlier caused me to think that you were trying to get, I heard two things. One is to try to eliminate surplus in these functions, the functions that Chad just described. And the second, however, was to stay as close to possible to the existing revenue stream, despite the fact that we've developed surpluses year by year by year, right? Are both true? Was that part of your methodology?
No, on the second one, we didn't try to arrive at your current revenue stream. We tried to arrive at your current expenditures. So our permit revenue, based on our analysis, was to meet your expenditure. So
And
if
your
you meet
base-
your expenditure, there is no surplus.
So and you've backed into roughly $90 an hour.
Right.
That's sort of the benchmark?
That's kind of the fully burdened hourly cost of your building division staff with labor, salary, fringe, overhead, and the indirect cost allocation.
Well, it sounds to me then that you've understood the goal. Your methodology gets to the goal. I guess the only, to maybe suggest something that I think Katie was interested in is whether it's appropriate to, when you get to the value of construction, eliminate soft costs and general conditions and the like, and exclude those from the value of construction. That might be the question that she was alluding to, and that seems equitable to me.
Except that would impact on the user fee concept. You would be subsidizing as opposed to more of a pure user fee.
But those components of cost in a construction contract have nothing to do, arguably, with the building department functionality.
But just to be clear, the value of construction that we used, it was based on the historical value of construction reported in the village. So depending on the methodology that the village uses to assess value of construction or how value of construction is reported or feed would have to be based on how the village is really collecting that information.
So
and
fair
processing.
enough. So if the village is collecting that information on the basis of contract price, the sum in the,
Right.
that will include insurance, that will include, if there's a bond, that will include all kinds of things that are contractor's profit. Whether those are appropriate components in a schedule of value analysis, that's debatable. And I guess the other question is this. When you were talking about a cap, a hard dollar cap, you used the historical comparison of what the maximum permit fees ever were. And there were two instances you mentioned where they were exceeded $25,000. Is there a predicate for including a $90 per hour charge if the otherwise effective cap is exceeded because the nature of a job is just that it's more complicated?
So two things. The cap was determined based on 9 months of permit history and us applying what our recommended fee would be. Where would that fee be today? So two of them came over that $25,000 threshold.
I think I'm driving at this. If a job is complicated.
Right.
And we're performing the functions that Chad described that are, appropriate reimbursement functions under the statute, why should we be shorted if we have to perform extra work? If the building department is put to extra tasks or, for whatever reason exceeds the cap, nobody's fault, why should we be shorted?
Well, then that would really refute the need for a cap.
I don't know, because, look, a cap is in part comfortable. It's nice to know what the maximum is, but if it's an odd case and it's exceeded for some extraordinary reason, there's sense in a cap politically. It sells. It's comfortable, as I said, right?
Well, there's some certainty.
Right.
There's some certainty.
But Frank, I think, I understand what you're saying, but I think you open up a lot of issues of interpretation, and somebody may feel that they're getting unfairly burdened by this hourly when someone else maybe did not have it, and that worries me a little bit about case-by-case basis and start making these decisions, and people may start saying, this is unfair, I want my money back. You didn't do that to him, but you did it to me.
Well, how often is that going to be?
Well, it twice in history, so maybe it's a non.
But what year were those two cases, and what were our fees at the time? Like, how far back?
This is for data from February of 17 through November of 17. And again, I want to be clear, this is not what the village charged. These are permits that based on either the value of construction or square footage, and in both cases it was square footage, that if we applied our recommended fee, the fee would have been over $25,000.
You said
One was
both
at
cases
27.
were square footage? Not value?
One for sure was square footage. It was an 18,000 square foot home.
Wow.
Yeah, and we can tell you because we have it. But in those two cases, the fees were $27,000 and $31,000. But that's not historical. That is based on permit data, that if we applied our proposed fees, that's what the fees would come out to.
Yeah, and I would think that when the projects get that big, it becomes a curve, you know? I mean, it's like how much, it can't be linear all the way up, you know? Once it gets to a certain height, it starts curving. And I think instead of doing a curve, it's just once you get to whatever number we want to set it at, that's it. I mean.
Well, and the reality is,
You're not really getting any
if you have a large new commercial project, the developer's going to have a threshold inspector. There are going to be inspections that the village will not be doing. You shouldn't be charging for them.
But that's interesting because if we have some large redevelopments happening, is the $25,000 reasonable or is that too low?
Well, again, we went by history. Obviously, anything could come down the pike.
Like in Oceana, you think $25,000 is too high or too low for Oceana?
I don't know, what's the square footage?
What's the square footage on it? It's like a 10-story, 12-story building?
It's 15 stories, but a better example would be Ocean Club. It was complicated, I think.
Ocean Club, yeah.
You know, and
the amount of plan reviews and inspections.
You have a threshold inspector.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. On a large commercial project, there are.
But even with the threshold inspector, you still need
Yeah,
things done.
You still
need to review the
plans. The
plans.
building official has the authority and the right to conduct the same inspection every time if he chooses. You have to conduct the trade inspections. You have to do plan review.
Well, did Oceana use a independent permitting, one of the private providers, or no?
I don't know.
They did it through the city?
so here's an example of the oddity, and I'll use Oceana. They flooded. Something happened. The engineers didn't expect it. The parking system didn't work as a result. Do you remember this? Yep. We had to go to work. This was unforeseen.
Right.
I don't know what the economic consequence of that problem was, but it was a significant problem. And it was, obviously borne by the developer mostly, but our building department had to do what it does.
Right.
And it wasn't projected at the beginning.
Right. And again, those are outliers, but, certainly we've calculated a blended hourly rate for you. You could put it in your fee schedule and give your building division the discretion upon special cases to apply that. Again, I think that could be dangerous because then somebody else can come in and say, well, my case is special. And then you get into, well, he was there a half hour, but I got charged for an hour. And then you have record-keeping issues. It becomes an administrative burden, So
Brett's reaction to the conversation that we were having about the outliers is correct. You don't want subjectivity and opportunity to complain about disparate treatment. Have you seen, for example, if someone uses a particularly advanced low-voltage system or something technologically advanced that's unusual, are there examples of treating those types of improvements differently than the average?
Your electrical inspectors are probably going to do the same work. Your plans examiner are going to look at the same thing. So I don't know how much of a difference that would create from the services that Village provides.
Yeah, they had to be within the code. They had to be approved.
Maybe an example, on Brickell or somewhere off of Brickell, somebody decided to establish a robotic parking garage.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't work.
I'll tell you all about that one. That's my client.
So that wound up, that's the city of Miami, but it wound up as an extra problem for the city of Miami to deal with that.
Right. Again, those are special cases.
It's Brickell House, that's right.
Yeah, I think we're never going to have, I think it's going to be very difficult to get to a perfect system. It really is. I mean, but we need to find the best system. I think that we can.
This came really, really close to doing what we asked.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll stick around.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Next item, Mayor. It's under the village manager's discussion items. Motion to authorize the manager to issue the request for proposals to resurface the community center pool deck.
No, I think we
I'm
were
sorry,
going
then
to
it's
the
10D.
building
Presentations.
permit form.
My recommendation to keep this in context would be to bring forth tab 9.
I apologize. Motion to
10D
authorize the
two.
manager to bring forth the necessary legislation to adopt the permit fee schedule.
And I would like for the Developmental Services Director to come up and give us a small presentation. Sergio? Sure.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. On behalf of the staff, we wanted to present a recommendation we wanted to make a quick presentation based on the recommendations from our consultants, but putting it more in line to what staff feels is the right mix for the department. In the end, the department has to deal with whatever fees are adopted, and we need to make sure that they are easy to apply and that we can apply them consistently. I wanted to cover 4 of the qualities of these permit fees that we are seeking. One, obviously, is cost recovery. They need to remain neutral. Second is transparency. It needs to be easy to monitor and easy to verify. Uniform application is important. This avoids errors, and it provides consistency in the application of fees across the board to all applicants. And of course, the easy application is for not only staff, but for customers to easily be able to calculate their permit fees. Just to recap, the first recommendation back in October by our consultants was 2.35 value of construction. It did include all the trades, so it was an all-inclusive figure. It provided a minimum of $100 per trade, but there was no maximum, and that's what brought this back today. And there are separate fees for zoning, planning, public works, and fire, as you've heard tonight. The recommendation that you just heard from our consultant was $1.30 per square foot. It's still an all-inclusive. The 2.3 value of construction, it continues to be all-inclusive with a minimum of $100 per trade and the maximum of $25,000 per permit fee. The square footage, their executive summary, and this is the first time it's come up, there is no differentiation between AC areas and non-AC areas as far as square footage is concerned. And this is of concern to us because anything under a roof is square footage and needs to be inspected and carries the same type of inspections as area under AC. So there is really no differentiation. And a garage, which is non-AC, still has to be inspected the same way as the interior. And our historical information that we've collected over the past has always been total area for that new construction. Okay, so just wanted to make that clarification. In addition to the minimum and maximums that they are proposing is for both methods of calculation. The 25,000 maximum applies to square footage permits, and the 25,000 applies to value of construction permits. And I think the question that was raised was very valid. Can I service a Oceania today for $25,000? The answer is no way. I cannot. Okay. So that brought forward to recommendation numbers by staff. And what staff is recommending is for all residential and commercial new construction, $1.90 per square foot. It's still an all-inclusive, and there is no cap. And it works well because square footage, the larger the project, the more work we have to do. That's self-governing. So when we have a project, a major project that's larger than a residential home, it's accounted for in the square footage. Very simple. I count the square footage, the total square footage of whatever project it is, apply the charge per square footage, and that's the permit fee. Simple, okay? No, everything is inclusive within that fee. For all other permits, 2.3% is applicable for the construction. Again, it includes all trade permits. There's the minimum $100 per trade, but we brought down the 25,000 down to 18,000 for renovations, based on information that our consultant has presented previously, and I have a slide for that. And we felt that there needed to be a balance between new construction and renovations, and this is what brought the $1.30 up to $1.90, and the 25,000 down to 18,000. We feel very comfortable, based on data that has been collected over 2.5 years, that the $18,000 should suffice for the majority of our renovations. Now, we are proposing that renovations are done based on value. It makes no sense in the industry to have renovations based on square footage. Here's a good example. I have 2 units side by side. They're exactly the same size. One unit says, I'm going to do cosmetics renovations worth $30,000. The unit next to it says, I'm going to gut the unit and I'm going to reconfigure it, and I'm going to spend $200,000. Same size, but different scope of work altogether, and those are renovations. That is what renovations are about. That is the complexity built into renovations. Now, how do you handle the value? Well, in new construction, square footage kind of stabilizes quality of materials. Quality of materials is not a factor when you do it per square foot, because a block wall is a block wall is a block wall. A metal partition is a metal partition is a metal partition. What changes is the quality of materials. How do we accomplish the same thing when we're doing it based on value, i.e. renovations? And that could apply to a condo unit, that could apply to a single family, that could apply to anything. And usually what my experience has shown is that allowances are usually listed by the contractors in their contracts. What does that mean? Well, I don't care about collecting a $6,000 price for a fancy toilet when an $800 toilet suffices and meets the code. I'm good with an allowance of $800. And that usually applies to all finishes, and just finishes, because that's where the upgrades lie. When you're talking about raw construction, it's raw construction. That works across the board. But usually we encounter the issues with values is where you have finishes. And that's the way you would handle renovations. Quite simply, you use allowances in your valuation to be submitted. And you spell this out when we come back with a resolution. You say, use allowances for finished materials. And everybody knows that that's what they need to use. And that stabilizes across the board for all renovations, whether it's water heaters or complete renovations of a condo unit or a home for that matter. Why did we pick the 18th? Well, let me move forward. As a comparison to what we had before, and this was over a year ago, not your temporary permit fees, we were using 70 cents per square foot, but that wasn't all inclusive. You still had to add the permits for the trades. So that brought the square footage price up. And then there was a 7% for all others. And back then, we were using valuation for all of our renovations. So for the 20 years of history from this key, renovations have been using value, not square footage. The square footage was used in this temporary fee that it was just thrown in there as a measure to control permit fees. So historically, the key has always used value for renovations at 7%. So where have we come to now? Well, this change in permit fees came about from a $2 million stucco renovation of a major building, where the permit fee based on 7% was going to be $140,000 permit fee. Okay? Today, that same job would be $18,000. That's where we come to. Okay? That's the difference that's making. What makes up a permit fee? It's not just about counting the number of inspections. A permit fee is a little bit of everything, of all the costs that you just heard by statute that it can be. It includes clerical costs. Clerical staff takes in the permits. They have to process paperwork. It's very difficult to put a number on that. It's all the calls, emails, and meetings that we take with our customers. That's part of what a permit fee costs. Obviously, plan reviews and then re-reviews of those plans, inspections and re-inspections, processing a variety of miscellaneous documents that every construction job generates. All that is included and can't really be itemized and counted. Obviously, at the end, there's processing a CO. And then there's the direct and indirect costs of operating the division. There's your equipment, computer costs, software licensing costs, all that. Every permit has to pick up a small portion of that. So in the end, we are revenue neutral, which is what we're intending to do. So here's two important graphs or charts that we use, and this was developed using over 2.5 years of data, actual data. And I've kind of highlighted the important stuff. So when we're talking about residential renovation, we see that 89.9% of all permits during this 2.5-year period fell within a $0 to $50,000 range value of construction. And today, with today's proposed fee, it would result in a $209 permit. Extremely reasonable. That's 90% of our permits fall within that range. That's historical information. And then that $1 million mark that I have highlighted there, that results in a $14,797. So hold that thought for a minute, because I'm going to tell you why that's important. The next slide is for commercial renovations. And we find that 75.7% of all our commercial renovation permits fall within the $0 to $50,000 range. And today, with the proposed fee, it would be a $285 fee. Extremely reasonable for 76% of commercial renovation permits. And again, the $1 million mark has a fee of $17,429. So we chose $18,000 based on that information as the cap for renovations, because we felt that for residential permits, renovation, there was only 0.3% of the permit activity fell at the $1 million mark. And for commercial, 3.8% of the permits fell at the $1 million mark. So we feel that that's very reasonable. And the question is, if we get a total building renovation, can we service it for $18,000? Maybe, maybe not. And that's the stucco repair example that I gave earlier. Okay? But those are a very small percentage of our business. The majority of our business in renovation, residential, and in commercial renovations has a $200 average permit fee. Extremely reasonable.
What are those averages on new construction?
On new construction is going to be, well, new construction, let's say we pick, if it was, this is percentage based. So if it was $1 million, percentage based $18,000, but we're not using percentage based for new construction, which is why we fall back to per square foot basis. I handed out some additional information.
But there's no cap on the per square foot.
There's no cap for square foot because it's self-regulating.
There's a cap because you can only build so much space.
Exactly, right. So we do put a cap on renovations. It makes a lot of sense. And based on historical information, we pick a good number for us. Okay. Now, there's additional information that I handed out. Since last week, I started to go around the U.S. and look at the document that says fee schedule comparison at the top. It's a 3-page document. I set out to look for how do other people in the United States calculate permit fees, seeking a different way or a better way than what we've come up with today. And I started at the local level. I went to our unincorporated Miami-Dade permit fee. I went to the City of Miami fee schedule. City of Hialeah, these are large communities that you figure that have a lot of permits and that would have found some way to do it. Miami Beach, Village of Pinecrest, City of Fort Lauderdale. Then I went over across to the West Coast, City of Los Angeles, Jacksonville, north of us, City of Orlando, City of West Palm Beach, and lastly, Indian Creek Village back home. And the more and more that I looked, the more and more I saw that everyone calculated their permit fees for new construction based on square footage, for all renovations based on value. This is a small sample picked at random across the U.S. that would probably represent a high percent of all U.S. permit fee schedules are doing it the way that we're proposing here. Square footage for new construction, value of construction for all renovations. This is the way everybody else is doing it.
Okay, so that's something that occurred to somebody that asked me this afternoon. If, for instance, the Ritz wanted to renovate the Ritz, would it be limited to $18,000?
Yep, that's correct.
Is that going to be enough to, I mean, how?
There's no way. I think the difference between 18 and 25,000 is not for what's going to be used, that it might as well be 25,000.
No, I'm just thinking,
It makes.
you know, how much, how many inspections would we need to have?
It varies greatly. It varies greatly. Depends on the scope. I gave you the example of the 2 units side by side, each doing different renovations. One would require a lot more inspection than the other, but they're renovations, they're the same size, just different values. So this industry has too many variables to try to predict. And that's why
I recognize that, but my concern is, I mean, I think we all were very interested in capping, you know, the fees. But this particular question as to what, if a building wants to do, the Ritz is a great example. That's a very large structure, right? And the amount of manpower that we would have to expend in order to inspect all of their renovations would be a very significant number, I would think.
It could be. It could be. But is
there any way to deal with that? I mean,
this is where the permit, you don't have a limit. In the research that
Sergio, we have Allison and then
Is
Katie.
it possible to have a third category, like projects over a certain size or a certain dollar amount?
It adds to the complexity of the calculations, and more important, it adds to the complexity of being able to forecast what your fees should be every budget, because that's the idea, that when you come.
But those projects really don't come up all that often.
Correct.
And I think if it were to come up, we just want to be able to make sure we can cover our costs of the inspections of that actual project. So I don't know that it needs to be incorporated that much into your planning, because it only applies if one comes up, and if it comes up, you just want to cover your costs.
My research of the fee schedules across the U.S., none of them had a max for that reason. The best fee schedule that I found actually was in West Palm Beach. And Councilmember Gross alluded to it in our first presentation. It's a sliding scale. It's based on value for all permits. It's a sliding scale, which means the higher value, the lower percentage. Kind of what Councilmember Moss was alluding to, that the curve has to flatten out. In addition, what I found interesting in that fee schedule was that the budget for that year, for that fiscal year, for this particular building department was a construction valuation issued of $250 million. Once they've issued that amount of permit activity within the same fiscal year, another fee schedule came into effect, which effectively lowered the permit fees for everything above the fiscal goal that they had.
That doesn't sound.
That would be
Well, and
awful.
that seems unfair
So-
based on
Completely
what time of the year you decide to redo your bathroom.
Well, but it makes a lot of sense, and I'm not, and I'm not saying that we go there. The significance of that one is that it used a sliding scale, it had no max, it recognizes the higher-end jobs, so it's fair across the board to everybody. Okay, but that's, the consequences of adding a cap, you're gonna have some permits that
But
you
are
may
we
not be able
going
to
to get
cover.
in the situation that we were historically, that the contractors and the developers that knew the game would say, we're putting in a $20,000 kitchen and put in a $50,000 kitchen, and the people who were new to the game and were honest were getting penalized for being honest and for not negotiating prices? This is what got us into this situation to begin with.
And that's why the document has to be clear. So if we put on the document
But when
that,
we started this whole process, we were told, and mind you, it was somebody else, but we were told that it's so difficult, it's so arbitrary to come up with those values, to challenge the prices and the allowances. And I just don't want to go back to where we were because it's very hard to implement.
But
So
one of
that's
the-
just a
One of the
thought.
things that Sergio said earlier might take the whole problem away if you base this on allowances instead of contract. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
but who
But Frank, that's inherently, and I was going to ask this question, I find that inherently hard for a resident. Think if you're pricing out a job, now you're going to a contractor and you're asking for an allowance. So when you submit this to the building department, you have no idea what your renovation is going to cost, and you actually need to budget.
I appreciate that, but here's where I think this could go. Getting back to the statute, you're right as far as your negotiation with your contractor and your own personal budget, but that's not the same thing necessarily as what we're talking about. Getting back to the functionality under the code, whether it's a this or a that, their function of inspecting and reviewing plans and all of that stuff that they have to do is exactly the same. So if it's a widget, there's an allowance for that widget. If it's a toilet, there's an allowance for the toilet. It doesn't matter whether it's a Soto or a whatever else. It's the same work. So, and you can go all the way down an itemized list of everything that goes into a building and come up with an allowance that's agreed to by the village and that's binding on the developer. That's possible.
that's possible.
So would we be asking the village to establish fees for each one of these particular items? That's an allowance that's considered the appropriate amount given the cost?
I think that's where it could go there, yeah. I think that's right.
I had a few questions.
Katie and then Lucia.
No, you're not talking about shell, and you're talking about finishes.
Finishes.
You're talking
Finishes.
about
Upgrades.
finishes. How many things are there? You have refrigerators, you have ceiling fans, you have lighting.
The range is huge. Who's going to challenge me when I put up a $1.50 for?
But this is the idea. It gets away.
The allowance.
It gets away from what you're paying and gets to what
We
their
recognize.
cost is for that inspection task.
And upgrade finishes is usually where the problem lies.
But that sounds more complicated than the first plan that was
Absolutely.
given to
But
us.
Katie,
contractors will review
Lucho, Gary, and Allison.
Okay, I had a couple questions. First of all, both of your recommendations, you went to $1.90 per square foot, and they're at $1.30, so that's higher. And then the 2.3% is probably higher also. I mean, you have a lower cap, but the cap isn't going to come into play very often at all. So I would assume that this would give you a lot more revenue than what they've calculated. So I have two questions about that. Number one, did you do a projection of what this would bring into your village or bring into the village? And is it revenue neutral? And number two, if you were building in a reserve, how much reserve are you building in?
There's no reserves, and any fee that we institute, no matter what it is, you have to give the test of time, because they're all projections, they're all estimates.
But are you basing this on the same numbers they were using? Because your numbers are, your recommendations are higher on both sides.
We kind of balance, so in essence, the revenue projection stays balanced. But as I said, there's no guarantee with any proposals that is exactly revenue neutral.
only the test of time. And when it comes to that time, we have to be able to adjust those numbers easily. If the process is complicated for doing permit fees, then that adjustment becomes a lot more complicated than it needs to be. And that's where the transparency comes in. So we don't know where we're going to be, you know, certainly not at the end of this fiscal period, but at the end of the next fiscal period, when we have a full year of any fees that are adopted, that's the true test of whether we emerge revenue neutral or not. And if we don't, how do we adjust? And then from that point forward, it's an adjustment every year. It's a review every year. Goes along with the budget process. Only actual numbers are the true numbers. And if indeed something is too high, it can easily be lowered.
But you would say that your recommendation brings in more revenue on both sides of this, wouldn't you?
I don't believe so.
Why not?
Because we balanced it out.
By what? What are you using to balance it?
Just historical numbers on the chart.
But I'm assuming you use the same numbers. That's where I'm a little confused. Okay. Second question I had is, right now you're using a price per square foot at 70 cents per square foot on both sides of this, right? New construction and renovations?
Correct.
And so that's the system that's currently in place. It's lower than we're looking at, but are you having problems with that system?
Yes, take a look at the next sheet that I have for you. It shows the revenues and the reserves from fiscal year 2014 to date. Fiscal year 2017, which is last year, where the temporary permit fee started from February, we're showing a negative $1,079,000.
Okay, but that's not a problem in implementation. We knew we were going to be losing money with this current fee structure.
But that's
So
that's more than what we anticipated. What we
Okay,
projected.
but again, what I'm asking is the system of charging price per square foot that you're currently doing, are you having problems with that procedurally? I'm not talking about the.
For renovations,
cost.
yes, they're inconsistent.
And are people complaining?
I don't hear them complaining because the fee is extremely low. But we can't sustain those fees.
Well, we're looking to raise the fees to an appropriate level.
Yeah.
But, so what do you see as the inadequacy if we were to go to $1.30 per square foot? Where would the problem lie?
In the cost for, let's say, a standard 3,500 square foot home, the $1.30 comes out to roughly $4,700. Based on numbers of actual permits that we did in office, we're losing money on those homes. Because
So your
previously,
concern is that it will be.
we won't cover costs.
Won't be
on those.
enough money.
Yeah, and that's a fact, because previously, under the original, the 7% renovation permit fees kind of covered those losses for those other permits.
It did more than cover based on our numbers.
So now we need to adjust it, and that's why we need to adjust that.
Okay, those are my questions.
Can I ask one?
We have Lucho, and then we have Gary, and then we have Allison, Brett, and you can be next.
Mr. JRD.
Yes.
Your recommendation is $130 per square foot for all new and renovation construction,
Please come up to the podium.
for
Thank
which
you.
square footage information is collected,
Yes.
and 2.3% for value of construction for which there is no square footage information.
Or
Can you
where square footage is not the applicable weight of fee.
Okay, so can you explain, can you show me, give me an example of the 2.3?
A water heater.
Okay, what if you're
A
doing,
swimming pool.
what if you're doing a swimming pool along with a renovation of a house? Then you're going to have two fees?
Yes, you would have that under the same scenario here anyway.
Calculated differently, but 2 fees.
It's always done like that.
And the water heater, which is part of the renovation, which would be part of the renovation of the house, would also be a second fee.
Yes.
A third.
And you,
But a water heater would hit the minimum
well,
fee of
that's
$100.
nothing, but I mean, I could think of, I mean, a lot of the lighting,
No, lighting would be included. Because if you're renovating, if you gut a house or a condo, you're going to redo the lighting, the plumbing, the electrical, the mechanical.
Well, what if you're not doing, what if you're not gutting? What if you're just doing the electrical.
Well, I gave the example before of if you just redid the lighting in your house, then the value of construction fee would apply because you're not involving all the
What
trades.
if you're doing the flooring and the electrical lighting?
Then again, it would be the value of that work.
So it would be the square footage?
No, it would be the value of the work because the
Not for-
flooring doesn't involve all your trades.
But that's not what, I mean, you'd have to write that into the ordinance then.
Well, that's the way we have it written. We have it written so that if where there is square footage and where it's applicable to use square footage, such as renovations, but not just flooring. We're talking about if somebody renovates their condo or their home or a kitchen or the bathroom where you're involving the trades. And in some cases, it's not going to be clean. And that's where the building division is going to have to use some judgment.
Yeah, I see a lot of problems with that, with the combination thing, because it's going to be almost.
You're going to end up in that situation regardless of which fee structure, Louise.
No, if something is based on square footage, it's square footage. If it's based on his is a combination. It's not the same. It could turn out to be a problem.
Sergio, yours could be a combination as well, correct?
No, that's where renovations, whatever you're doing, in the renovation example, if you're doing your water here, the lights over here, and your flooring,
It's all
that has a
percentage of-
value, and it's based on percentage. Quite simple, straightforward.
Same, it would be the same. Because you're not renovating the entire condo. So in our examples, it would be the same.
I see it.
But there's one thing different that's significantly different. He's saying, your proposal is that if square footage is the appropriate measure, then it's a price per square foot calculation.
Yes.
And if it's not, which I fully understand, and I don't see it quite like my colleague here, I think that makes perfect sense. If it's not, then it's value.
Right.
And I like the idea of attributing allowances instead of real value because that solves the problem of the Rolls Royce versus the Kia.
Right.
But your proposal is one or the other depending on the nature of the work. If it's a renovation, it's one thing, and if it's new construction, it's another thing. Not as variable depending on what's the more appropriate measurement. That's the difference between your two proposals, apart from the 130 versus the 190 and the no cap versus the cap.
And the reality is you have so little new construction on the village that essentially it's going to be based mostly on value of construction.
Well, right now.
Right now.
Very little construction.
Right.
New construction.
New construction. You had 12 new construction permits in the 9-month period.
That's, yeah, I mean,
That'll change,
if we're looking to change this every year, I understand that. But I mean, 5 years ago, it was different, completely different.
Right.
It was all new construction,
Well, and that's why, I agree with Sergio that you really need to look, I would say don't even look at it annually.
Right.
You need to monitor your revenue on a monthly basis to make sure you're hitting the mark.
Gary, you're next, and then Allison and Brett.
We need a second podium.
Well, actually, yes, you do need two podiums. Because we have two methodologies here, and personally, I like the one Sergio came up with, and I will tell you why. So your renovation of a 400 square foot garage or a 400 square foot kitchen, okay? You renovate a garage, you might spend $10,000. You might have to come in and do one concrete slab inspection and some cabinets on a wall. You renovate a kitchen, you could spend easily $40,000 or $50,000 with all kinds of electrical, with plumbing, with flooring. It's so much more of a complex job. And there's no possibility at $1.30 a square foot, in my view, that you could adequately inspect a 400 square foot kitchen for $520 with all of the sub inspections, the electrical, the plumbing, and all of the other things you bring into it. But if we did that strictly on a square footage basis, as you're suggesting, that would be the inspection, that would be the entire permit fee.
Right.
So to me, we have to get somewhere close to charging a permit fee based upon the cost of providing the service. And if your cost of providing a service on a complex project is so much more because of the various components, you got to have a way of accounting for that, as opposed to just square footage.
Right. So in your example, the garage would fall under the value of construction because you're talking about just the floors and some cabinets. So
you just said it would be square footage.
No. I said if all the trades are involved, then you apply the square footage. So in this case, the garage would not. In the example of your kitchen at $400, at 400 square feet times $1.30, that's $520. When you divide that by the $90 an hour, that's approximately 6 hours of service.
Yeah.
Right? So you're probably going to have, what, 10 inspections? A rough and a final for each, 8, couple fail, 10 inspections, each at about a half hour. I mean, we've done the math on that too. So it might, on the surface, seem like you're losing a lot of money, but I think it might be close. It also depends on the quality of work that's done. Are your contractors passing inspection on first try? Typically, not. Are the plans good? Do you keep going back and forth? All these things are factored in. So the $520, while it might seem that that's not enough, I would argue that it's probably close. Maybe a little low, maybe high, depending on the quality of the work.
Well, I think that I'm more relying on Sergio to indicate what he thinks on that, because I think when you're bringing in, on a very simple project, one inspection and maybe one small electrical, as opposed to lots of electrical and lots of plumbing and lots of other elements that go into a more complex project, there can't be an equivalency of cost that you can equate to square footage. It's impossible, in my view.
Okay.
And I've been through it because I've remodeled kitchens 3 times, unfortunately. And it's
Finally get it right?
Never yet. Maybe the 4th time we will. Sergio, I'd like your comments on that.
Yeah. One of the advantages of value of construction is it automatically adjusts for everything that's included. And here's a very simple example. If we needed to switch out a tank water heater, where it requires a plumber, cost of equipment and the labor for that plumber, let's just say it's $1,000. That would be the permit fee. But now, if the customer wants to change a tank to a tankless, well, price of equipment and labor for the plumber is probably the same, but now you have to introduce the electrician who has to upgrade the electricity for that, and now he may charge you an extra $500, so now the value is $1,500. Well, and that is correct, because now I have to do an inspection for plumbing and an inspection for electrical, a plan review for plumbing and a plan review for electrical. I need to take in documents for water heater and electrical schedules, and I have to issue 2 permits. 1 master, 1 sub. So it's all relative when you're talking values, because the higher the value usually means the more involvement from other subcontractors. And that's the advantage of it, but it's still kept streamlined and simple with just 1 fee.
Did you have a question?
I just have one quick follow-up
Absolutely.
question, because I think, to me, the key in a fair and reasonable percentage of cost permit fee, and I don't want to harp on this, but it's making sure that costs of materials have no impact whatsoever on that fee.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to put in a kitchen and spend $10,000 on appliances, and somebody else wants to spend $50,000, it should be exactly the same. And I think that it's really important, if we adopt this system, for your department to adopt some kind of standardized pricing method that totally eliminates the consideration of the cost of materials.
Yeah. I totally agree. I'm totally in support of that, because I have no need to collect additional permit fees based on upgrades of material. We don't provide any additional services for that.
Now, mind you, Katie and this gentleman were skeptical of that. You have to do this correctly.
Frank, Allison, then Brett.
So my first question is, in the example that Sergio said of 2 different apartments, varying levels of renovation, but the same size, how does your system address this? I think you just answered it, but if you could.
Same size, charge $1.30 a square foot for your permit, regardless of what finishes or appliances you.
No, not just finishes, extent of work, right? Like if you're changing out minor things versus a total gut renovation?
A total gut, you apply $1.30. Minor things, you apply 2.3%
Okay.
of the value of construction.
Okay.
But
But
do you
how?
determine when it's a minor
Where do
thing?
we draw that line? I think my concern with both plans is the areas that are left open for interpretation. We got into this because we felt there was real inequities in our system. So I am comfortable trying to find, for me, our goal should be trying to find a way to eliminate these gray areas. So how do we determine that difference? The same with how do we make sure that all of our allowances are consistent? I'm not yet fully sold.
Well, I'm not going to talk about the
No, that's fine.
allowances.
If you could tell me about how we would determine that difference.
When the permit application is filled out, somebody in Sergio's shop looks at it and says, this is the fee we apply here. In our scenario, it's very simple. If you're using the trades, then it's a cost per square foot if you have the square footage. If it's a one-off here, one-off there, then you apply value of construction. That's how we determine it.
Okay. Are we done? Brett?
Okay, so a couple things here that I see are somewhat of a concern. And one, I think, is the value of construction is obviously one of the big concerns here and how you control that. The other thing is something that you just mentioned, which was cost of square foot is only applicable when all trades are involved. In most renovations, not all trades are always involved. Probably the majority of them, they're not. So then they would all revert to value, which would maybe 90% of all of what your plan is doing is going to be kind of what Sergio's doing, besides maybe a small percentage that is fully gutting everything. That's what I got from what I heard with the all trades. Something that I brought up a couple times, and I don't think I've ever spoken to any of my colleagues about, so I wanted to bring it up. And it's more of that out of the box idea of how, is there something else out there that can work other than going cost of value or square footage? And I know that Sergio spent a lot of time looking for it and really wasn't able to find that. It seems like most people are either value or square footage. The idea that popped up in my head a few months ago, and I don't know if it works, and I definitely see some issues with it, but maybe it should be explored at some point, and whether we pass on today or tonight and relook at this as a possibility. But what I was thinking was you can split basically the projects up into two ways. You have your renovation and you have your new construction. And if somebody comes with a permit in a renovation and submits it, right there they can say, or even when it goes through the process and comes back, they can check off, you need a plumbing on this one, you're going to need building, and you're going to need electrical. You're not going to need mechanical, you're not going to need structural. All this other stuff you don't need. You only need those three. At the same, what we can do is we can look at all renovation projects, see how many plumbing actual inspections and reviews were needed, how many mechanical inspections and reviews were needed, and those could actually be averaged out to a price per that discipline. And same thing can happen with new construction. Somebody comes with new construction, this is the list of what you need, and those can also be back out, and it might be a much different price that it would cost for a, let's say, the building inspector, because they might have to do multiple partial inspections as they're building a shell of a structure. So it could be a much different cost there. So when someone comes up and delivers it, basically you say, okay, you need plumbing, you need building, and you need electrical. These are the fees for those three. You pay that, you're done. And it would be cost neutral in the end because it was all backed out with the same price. Now, what I see that might be difficult would be the very big projects might be getting a huge discount, and the very small projects might be paying an exorbitant amount of fees. So it really looks at the average, and I don't know if we can look at that closer and see, is there a way to make this thing work or not? I mean, but I'm just trying to think. That was the only one that I could think of that doesn't use this other two methodologies that could clarify people when they bring in a permit, they know they're paying for those services that that they're going to need, whether it's new construction or renovation. So I don't know what you guys think about that. If it's something that we should maybe explore, or maybe someone has used this, or
A modified hourly rate, basically.
it's not an hourly rate. So basically, what it is that you can take all of your new construction and say, all the plumbing permits that were pulled on new construction, there was this many, and all new construction was valued at this much. And you can divide that between your plumbing permits and how many there were on that, your building permits, your inspections, everything. You can go through and you can average it all out by how many were called under new construction versus how many were called under renovation. And you can get an average cost of that. And then whoever comes in with that, it's just a fixed fee for each of those disciplines. So I just wanted to bring that up because they have not heard that. I know I've reached out to you guys a little bit about it, but again, I try to even put it in Excel, try to see if it would work. And when I put it in Excel, I see the issues at the high end and the low end, but the middle seems to work.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's worth a study.
I just don't think it's that you can do it so black and white. And unless you do that prospectively, where you have a tally of all the work that was done there, and then you calculate how many hours were spent, multiplied by the hourly rate. I think to predict that, to say your permit fee is going to be this, I think you might be taking some flexibility away from your folks in the field, that, maybe a screw is missing, and they say, I'll be back in a half hour. And
I'm not saying do hourly. I'm just saying that out of all new construction, a plumbing permit, averagely, to have the plumbing inspector over the whole, so basically you say how much is it? It was like, let's say it's $2 million or whatever, $10 million in construction of new construction. And you can list all the permits that were called over all of them. And then you can say, okay, we divide it up like this, and the plumbing, you basically would back it out and say, as long as you got that fee flat all the way across and flat all the way across on each of those disciplines, you would come out zero at the end. And then whoever comes in, they ask for it, it's just a fixed fee. It's never depending on what hour, how many hours. No, it's just, look, you need plumbing on a new construction, $700. That's it. For plumbing. You need structural, $400. You need building, $1,000, whatever it is. And it keeps adding up until you have all the disciplines that you need. Gives you your total permit fee and you're out.
Right, but the way you'd calculate that is based on your cost times the number of hours. That's how you have to come up with that cost.
But you do that over so many years of historical price, and you get and you hit it as a flat fee. I don't know if it will work, but this was just an out-of-the-box thought, I guess. And you may come back, if we decide that we want to study it, you may come back and say, this doesn't work. I mean, it wasn't a good idea, but at least, maybe we can look at something. I'm not saying that that's the way we should go, but, maybe we can even pass something tonight, but, look at something like that, something different.
I want to thank you both. We have two very, very good options. We've come a long way in this analysis. And it's such a better process than we had started with and we had before. My issue right now is how do we promote kind of discipline and accountability, and what's kind of a tighter approach, and that's what I'm working through to make sure if we wanted to be as precise as we can with the cost and also control the overages and then that's what I'm struggling with. And I think your analysis is a little tighter and the numbers are a little tighter, but they're both very good options. But not everything is perfect is what I'm learning.
Well, and, just to be clear, we work for the village and the manager and for Sergio, so.
No, and I think you guys
whatever,
yes.
You decide we're fine with.
I know. Yep.
Okay, so let's say we're renovating the stucco of a large building, and the cost was $2 million. So you would calculate that with the square footage?
No,
Maybe we're the only two.
No, I would calculate that with the percentage, and the maximum might
Okay, so
apply.
a percentage would be $46,000 for the permit of a one inspection job.
Except there's a max.
The max would apply. And I think those
Okay,
are.
I'm sorry, yeah,
and I-
$25,000.
And I really think those are special circumstances that you need to have, Sergio needs to have some flexibility. The fee schedule has to have flexibility, because under both scenarios, the max would apply, whether it's 18,000 or 25,000. The question is, how much is it costing the village to provide that service of plan review and inspections for that stucco work? And if the answer is $1,000, then regardless of how you come up with the fee, it's going to be too much. And this is one of those outliers where I think you have to sit and have some flexibility in your fee schedule. And I think.
Well, but it's an outlier, but it's a very, very, it's going to happen. It happens all the time.
Well, in that case, you might.
It's not really an outlier.
Well, I don't
Well,
know.
it lies
how-
outside of our fee schedule, although it's common enough that we need to have a way to
Yes,
address
right,
it.
But you could have an exception in there, just saying redo stucco would be maximum amount this amount and done.
Come up
Yeah,
with
we're gonna have to
come
have a
up-
lot of
You
exceptions.
can come up with a fee for stucco work, or you could say, for stucco, we're going to charge you $90 an hour. However many hours we spent, that's what we're going to bill you.
So long as that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. We'd have to have a lot of, I think that our building department would have to come up with a significant list of exceptions, and there's no reason why they can't.
So are we passing something tonight? or-
Let me clarify.
Thank you.
Concrete restoration on a building lot is not a one inspection.
Okay, well, whatever number.
But
Sorry.
what I want to say, it's not as much inspection intensive as it is report intensive, which translates into a lot of hours in the office, because usually what happens with those kind of jobs is that we get reports from their engineers that are looking precisely at what kind of repairs they're making on a detailed basis, and they have to submit by code those reports to us. So then we have to review all those reports, make sure they are in compliance, and we have to submit those into the record.
For stucco?
For concrete restoration, that's usually what we're talking about. That's when concrete spalls, because your steel rust
No, that's
pops out.
That's different. I'm talking about stucco, which is.
Well, I'll tell you that a building like that will not re-stucco. You're talking about concrete restoration on a building.
I know
next
what
to the
concrete
ocean.
restoration is. That's a different. That's a different.
So if you're re-stuccoing.
My
for
firm
decorative
specializes in construction litigation. Not me, but my partner does. I know exactly what the difference is. I'm talking about something as simple as re-stuccoing because this building is 25 years old and it needs to be re-stuccoed or whatever.
Yeah. Maybe single-family home. That usually, you see that many times, but.
No, I think we can do it. We just, it's an exception, and we'd have to come up with a list of exceptions, and you adjust them as they come along.
Well, again.
This is not a perfect science, what we're talking about here.
Right.
Okay. No, I can ask my question later.
No.
I'm good to move on.
So we need an ordinance.
We have,
We need to come back with.
are we good? We've got a motion on the floor.
A motion for what?
It's a resolution.
It's a motion.
So, there is a resolution on this.
John's resolution is to authorize him to do something. What
We need a motion.
We need,
do we want to do here? This is motion to authorize manager to issue, to bring forth the necessary legislation to adopt a fee schedule.
Okay.
I need to know if you'll go to tab 9,
yes.
and you'll go to the third page in, where it's highlighted in yellow, the consultant's final recommendations or staff's final recommendations. If you'll direct me on one of those two, we will bring back legislation by way of a resolution at the April 10th meeting.
But this is a reso.
Just a motion.
No,
for
I know, but it's coming
give
back as a
direction.
resolution.
He wants
So
us
we
to
won't have
give
two
official
hearings.
direction.
Because I thought if we had two hearings, it's a different process, but we don't.
One hearing.
This is,
Somewhere we were supposed to, before you decide to vote on this, what we've been trying to figure out after listening the last 2 hours, if we can say from a public point of view, you're not ready to do this. there are competing issues here. It really needs some more work. And I think the fact of saying to the village manager, go to A or go to B, is kind of Samson-like, splitting the baby, and it's not going to get you where you need to know. As a public member, just a member of the public, I would say, much as I hate to see anything deferred, you really need to have some more discussion here between your experts or whoever to get a process that you're comfortable with, because you've got 7 people here who are not comfortable with with any part of the process. And that's all we're trying to say from the vantage point of sitting out here listening to some very interesting discussion, and there's just a lot of data that isn't correct. There's a lot of, well, we're going to balance it here, balance it there, but there really isn't something that you can go on. And so you're going to, that's only our suggestion is don't try to make a choice tonight of something that just isn't ready to be chosen. Thank you.
Yes, Frank.
I didn't agree with that point earlier on a different topic, but I agree with that point now on this topic. I think that's correct.
Me too.
Tony. Okay, Tony? And then Katie, and next steps. Let's at least have some direction for the next steps. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. On the issue of the buildings, with the condos going forward, again, condos are not going to be torn down, not yet. So it's all renovation. And the issue of stucco is a very real issue, because stucco has to be looked at every 7 years when we paint. So this is not an outlier. It is an ongoing process. Every single building goes through this. That needs to be taken into consideration. I liked Luis's recommendation that we look at these so-called outliers that are that are regularly reoccurring and address them directly, with the building department, to see what is really required to address those things and come up with a concept that works. So I think I agree with Don that we're almost there, but we're not 100% ready, and I think you've all expressed the reasons why. Thank you.
Thank you. Sergio, do we have any buildings that are coming up for a 40-year certification?
I don't have a list in mind. I know that there has been several, but I would have to do a research to see if
I'd like to know what's in the forecast.
But it doesn't have to wait for the 40 years
Right,
to
right.
sustain.
To do a real.
In fact, the condo across the street from us, you can see all the patches, and that's the sort of concrete restoration that usually takes place on a building like that near the ocean. And it's extensive. They've done the front facade, now they've moved over to the side facade. And it's extensive, it's expensive, and that's one of the stucco, it's really a concrete restoration that we get a lot of reports on, and it turns into a lot of work in the office. But recapping, going back to our previous fee schedule, when it was 7%, that would have been a much higher. Today, based on staff recommendation, it's $18,000. If you're talking about a $2 million project, which usually that's where they run in, it's still a very, very reasonable fee for their permit.
From what I got out of this,
yes,
it seems like the common exceptions will be something that we should add into this, and the standard of finished costs, if we're going to go based on a cost value. I don't know if we're going to need to look at the caps. I think that Sergio's caps doesn't cap the square footage, which protects us, I guess, from very large projects. And it's only governed by how big they're going to build it. But we should look at the cap on the value side and make sure that it's not too high or too low, and maybe have them come back with those elements in it and see if we can get something passed.
Well, the type of clarity that we were talking about earlier with respect to both the outliers and maybe another good example is the balcony restoration work at the Sands and at Key Colony. Those are significant projects, and they will continue to happen, right? That's ordained. And also the concept of the allowances that, that there was some initial skepticism about, but I think is a manageable problem. I think the next time we talk about this, if you could have detail on those points, it'd help us achieve the type of clarity that we're looking for.
And I think that whatever we bring back, we should have JRD maybe double check to make sure those values are correct. From what I heard is that right now I'm leaning more towards Sergio, the plan that came through, only because the plan that that JRD put through was that is almost the same thing, because the square footage, my understanding, had to be all trades. Then the square footage will kind of kick in if it's all trades, and I don't think that happens very often unless you're completely gutting everything out of your apartment. So I kind of see that they're almost the same plans in a way. What gets difficult is finding out when do you go for one or the other. So I would think that maybe leaning more towards Sergio's with these exceptions and the standards of finish, and look at the caps one more time and run it through JRD so they can make sure that this is balanced and fair. And if things need to get adjusted, and maybe we go from there. And I'm not sure if you guys think that might be a good way to look at it.
I don't know that we'll come to agreement because we have different philosophies on how the permit fee should be derived, but, you know, I'm happy to keep working with Sergio. Hopefully we come up with something.
Well, what he said is that you could check the numbers to make sure that they're going to, whether you agree with.
I mean, personally, I would love to get away from the cost of value, but it just seems like we keep getting back into it. And even the cost of square footage in the renovation and the square footage, it seems like we're not really getting away from it, because it seems like, I mean, unless I'm interpreting it wrong, but it seemed like you need all trades in order to get that.
Well, if you don't have all trades, then if you charge for all trades, but, you know, they're only doing lighting, then you're overcharging. You're not really providing the service, so.
Yeah. But it might be cheaper than doing the cost or value for one trade than just to go for square footage for all trades.
Can I ask a question? Just this is for Sergio.
Tony, you cannot speak from there because no one can hear you.
Yeah, just a question. How do you determine, and who determines the cost of trades that are going to be the basis for how you get the permit on a value basis? And which contractor will know what they are? Will they be published somewhere, those numbers, or some contractors will know, others won't know?
I foresee a schedule and a lot of transparency. We're not going to do a guessing game, and I think they both agree pretty much as to the hourly rate, pretty good, or at least the analysis, and we need to kind of maybe focus a little bit on that and make sure that we're comparing apples to apples. But there was an analysis of, you know, inspection rates, review rates, soft cost, and trying to see what, you know, and the bennies and everything, and but there's a way to evaluate that.
You know, if we get that right, and I think we can.
Yep.
Because it's really empirical stuff.
Yep.
And it's limited. The difference between the two philosophies is narrowed to the point of near negation, as I see it.
Katie.
I'm sorry, I don't remember. What was the first recommendation through JRD? Because there was a portion of this that was percentage of construction, but not all of it. Can you refresh my memory?
It was all value of construction.
All value.
It was
And what was
2.35%
Okay.
value of construction.
The reason that I feel that it comes to a point of negation is because if the concern about construction value, which is a legitimate concern because of the Rolls-Royce versus the Kia, is not addressed, then the equity is better served by a per square foot cost, without question. It can't be otherwise. It just is. But if the allowances that address the schedule of values are ordained and make sense and are complete enough and empirically based enough, there is no inequity, arguably.
So am I correct to make a decision on this once and for all? We need numbers. We need both plans working off the same numbers.
Yep.
So that we have revenue that's backed forward. And then we also need to understand what these allowances are going to be
Yes,
and what those are set at
and what the outliers are and how to deal with them.
and how the outliers are. So
Yeah.
exactly who's going to do what?
Sergio.
do everything.
Sergio.
Okay.
He's our director.
Okay.
It's going to be a shot in the dark, I guess, because
The allowances that I think he's discussing is an amount that normally is put there by the contractor that's still going to do the work.
Yeah, but we're saying it can't be that.
I
Yeah.
recognize that. Now, how are you going to be able to come up with that allowance? It's almost impossible. I don't,
Well, if you're shaking your head in agreement with the impossibility,
Yeah.
then
problem, right?
we're sitting here with a different assumption.
So based on what I said earlier, based on my experience with value based on percentage of construction in other municipalities, the contract would always come in by the contractor showing allowances for certain finished materials. And we would accept those, knowing that at the end, they might be upgraded, but we never valued the permit based on those upgrades. We based it on what the contractor thought the allowance, their allowance was.
Okay, so.
And that varies greatly from materials.
Again, you're going to get the situation.
But there are thousands of materials, and we cannot comprehensively come up with a list of thousands of finished materials.
But you're not.
he might put like an $800 toilet, but I know I can get a nice toilet for $500.
But we're not talking about this, you're not talking about thousands of materials, are we? We're talking about the
Potentially, yes.
inspection function that you have to perform for all the things that you have to inspect. That's not to say that there are thousands of things, that you have 18 inspections, for
No,
example.
when it comes to valuation, when it comes to renovations, based on renovations, the issue lies in the upgrades of finished materials.
But we're ignoring upgrades. We're attributing a baseline value for X, Y, and Z.
But the contractor's doing that. We don't want to do that.
Can't do that.
Because
You
the
were
list,
going to do us, you told us you were considering a schedule of putting a refrigerator at $800.
no, we don't price appliances. They're not included in the evaluation.
I mean, I'm
It's
just
finishes.
giving an
Yeah.
example. A
We've
toilet.
just wasted a good 45 minutes. Because
Yes.
I did say at the beginning that contractors would set the allowances and not set in their contract the upgraded value.
No, that's not where we were.
So I stand firm where I am.
Can I, if we were to go back and look at this square footage, what happens if instead of it being all trades, it's 2 or 3, or we set a different number
that's a problem.
of trades?
Right.
So that we can increase the percentage that is done on the square footage basis?
It's more of a use fee.
Just out a quick question for all of
Yes.
you. I mean, we're currently at 70 cents a square foot. What is the harm of raising this to $1.30 a square foot and having an analysis to see if we're coming revenue neutral? Why are we, and then, I mean,
We
the
don't have to
system's in
set
place.
this forever.
The other suggestion I might make
Yes.
is, in the scenario that we presented, if it's got square footage and it's renovation, accepting that some renovation will not include all trades, just charge a square foot for renovation.
That might work. That would be better. Yeah, the all trade thing is the one that threw me from here to here. That was it.
So some kind of substantial threshold, but whatever, you know.
I mean, this is where we started, and this is what we asked, is to have something that we felt like showed a relative worth. And we're currently using that system, it's just at a much lower rate. So it seems like we could make a decision to increase it to the amount that's been determined by our consultants that's revenue neutral, and then deal with outliers and other issues and get a more solid if we want to tighten it up.
I think we should do exactly that.
I do too.
I agree.
Katie. Thank you.
So
So,
what we direct
Mr.
them-
Manager, do you have have enough guidance to where we're going? Thank you.
So let's recap. We're going to raise it.
We're going to raise it
to
to
$1.30 at this point in time.
Yes.
We're
And
going to
square
ask,
footage basis when it's applicable, when you have a square
the
footage.
way they've been doing it now.
Substantial renovation, doesn't have to be all the trades, but it's substantial. And I
And
like,
we'll get a report on what that means from a number standpoint and where we have problems, and we'll take direction from there.
and a maximum permit fee of,
Yes. I don't care if it's
I like-
18 or 25.
I think the
frankly.
25 is, it's going to be one or two houses, and it's probably what it costs, and so I think it's.
But if it's on square footage basis, it should maybe just take off the cap and let the square footage be the square footage.
There's a natural cap
There,
because
because it is gonna, yes.
Build.
So the 25,000 I'm comfortable with, and I do think that's close to the natural cap.
let's go for it.
Let's do it.
How big the project is.
Yeah.
Should be
So
more.
18 is definitely not, I think.
But no cap,
Well, no cap.
square footage basis?
No cap.
I think Sergio's correct. Just take off the cap and let the square footage be the thing that.
Wait, but what happens then?
What do you
happens
think,
then
Sergio?
In a situation where you are replacing the stucco of
Use
a
the square
building?
footage on
You would
something like
use
that
the
because it's-
cost
it's-
of the service.
Then but it's even worse. You
With a
still,
cap,
you
with a cap.
Why don't we
you
ask,
need a cap.
No, the cost value, cap, square footage, no cap.
why don't we ask
Yes.
Sergio what he'd like to do with that? With the cap?
I agree that if you go based on square footage, it's naturally limiting itself, so there's no need for a cap. Cap is meant for value basis. Now, how the complexity comes in renovations, when you determine what falls within square footage and what does not. We'll work to try to define that better if that's the direction the council wants to go in. Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Well, I think we also should direct him to look for a list of exceptions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Things that you think are commonly
And
occurring
you can work
exceptions.
with the local contractors, I think, that can help you.
How long should that list be?
Well, as long as you think.
As long as you say
Well, no, I mean, I can tell, I
Because
can,
everything could be an exception.
Yeah, but
and that's-
commonly
and-
occurring ones.
And that's the issue that now your fee
remember,
schedule is
You're
now
the director,
a lot
you,
more
you
complicated.
can,
Use
you
discretion.
can use judgment. Not everything's an exception, we all know that.
Well, we're driving consistency, and the more inconsistency you place in permit fees, the more inconsistency.
So
You'll
maybe
have.
the exceptions are on the side of caution, but there are some things that are low-hanging fruit that we all know are,
Okay.
okay?
Can you just recap? I'm sorry, because we're going to bring back a resolution. I want to make sure that we have it right. I know it's $1.30 a square foot,
Katie?
correct?
why don't you do it?
No max.
Got it.
Commonly
occurrence exceptions.
Which then are not, it's an oxymoron.
At this point, Chad, we're basically taking what's currently happening at 70 cents a square foot and we're raising it to $1.30 a square foot with no max.
Right, I understand that, but I think our current fee schedule probably just says 70 cents a square foot, right? It
With a
doesn't
cap.
have all
It
these other,
doesn't have
these other things.
value.
Right, right, so.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
that's what was throwing me off.
Okay.
But,
I thought what we're basically doing is JRD's recommendation without the cap on the square footage and adding the exceptions into it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what we have right
And
now.
not requiring the all trades for the square
Yeah, not
footage.
requiring
Just
all
If it
trades.
has square footage, we apply square footage.
Okay,
So it's a hybrid of the two. I guess,
Yes.
a little bit.
okay.
a tweak.
And you can rest assured that whatever you write, we will read.
And change.
And rewrite at the next meeting.
If I could just clarify something, we saw a couple of permits. One of them was for replacing turf on a field, and there was a square footage to it. So that's why we said in our report, a structure with square footage. You don't want to charge.
So it could be exterior, but as long as it's a structural.
It's a structure.
piece.
Structural.
So, like,
Thank
if
you
had
for
a-
that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Did you get that, Chad?
And just to clarify, is your no max for both residential, for new and renovation?
No, value of construction would have a max, but square footage would not.
Of construction.
Mr. Manager, it's 10 o'clock. Do you want to do the rest of your items? Or do what?
Well, we haven't even set the agenda.
Haven't even set the agenda.
Let me see how it plays out, and then I'll make a
First.
recommendation.
Okay, so we have update on beach renourishment. That's next, and then we're setting the agenda.
If I may,
Yes.
Under tab 4, very, very briefly, what you have in front of you is a draft copy of a letter to the Army Corps of Engineers regarding the mitigation and shore damage attributed to navigational work, the Section 111 discussion. Simply and I guess expeditiously, this is a recommendation for us to take action which does nothing more than makes formal application for a study of beach management along the shoreline of the village. And I would like permission to send this letter out as early as tomorrow to get this process moving. So financial obligation, this is just to get us to that first step. And I think that our consultant has recommended that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the step which is moving forward towards getting the Army Corps to acknowledge that the government cut project is approximate cause for our beach problem, and they will pay for a study. They will make a determination, and if that determination finds, with all the information we sent them, that it is responsible, they'll pay up to $10 million for a beach. So this is something we definitely ought to do.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Just one more quick point on
Yes.
this. We've been waiting for the state to finalize its budget because we are now number 21 on a list of 20 in order to get reimbursed for our last year's beach renourishment project. And the budget that's set, that's allocating the money to this beach renourishment fund, will dictate how much each of the top 20 gets. And it will also determine whether or not we get to jump up a few spaces because our project has already been finished. And some of the projects on that list haven't even begun. So the bottom line is we think we have a very good shot at getting something back from our last year's project. But since the budget hasn't been set yet, we have no idea how much.
And just to add to that, because Colleen set up a meeting with me and the director of DEP. The other thing that will affect our budget and our position, which I think is a good thing, is some of the other projects will be funded with hurricane money. So they will fall off that list anyway. And so depending on the money that's allocated, we might get funded.
Right.
And in addition to that, they are looking to fund as a line item on appropriations or like our what is it that they call our like feasibility study. Thank you. So the feasibility, those are the two things that are pending, is the reimbursement and the feasibility study. So hopefully that will work.
Colleen had mentioned that she was hopeful for some information. I'm looking at my PDA and it says, as of 10 minutes ago, budget negotiations are still going on at the state legislature. So they're into overtime. She was hoping that possibly we could expound the
Get
news
some
that we're
kind of-
moving forward, but maybe later on in the evening.
Yeah, okay, good. And so now,
So now the next item is approval, deferrals, additions, deletions, substitutions, withdrawals.
I have an addition.
yes.
I want to add the karate tournament as a discussion item.
Yeah, I was
And,
gonna,
and can I put that as my number? Right now, I have one in number 1 since we have people here supporting the security of schools, and I can put that one down as number 8.
Okay,
So I can swap them out.
sure.
I have an addition.
Yes.
I'd like to discuss the Weston lawsuit about the gun preemption.
Okay, yes.
no, I was going to do the same thing that he did.
Okay. Yes, John.
I'd like to add an item. It's an update from a gentleman who's in the room on the Toddler Park lot lighting project.
Okay.
It should only take a couple of minutes, but I do have Mr. Cook here to discuss where we're at with that project.
Fair enough. And I'd like to pull ordinance 8A. We got the last version of that ordinance today at 11:40. We have absolutely no impact analysis on it, and it's got a lot of financial implications and policy implications. So I'm concerned that we've spent more time on a letter of intent for a fast track, small project than we have on this. This is a huge policy decision. I'd like to come back with some information on it of what the impacts are.
Could we have the discussion, though?
Absolutely. Change it? No, because I don't even, we're guessing, we're spitballing. I'd love to have a discussion and analyze exactly all, it might be the best thing in the world, but we're going blindly. I'll tell you, the county does, when they do this, they go to committee, they have all sorts of experts, they have impact statements, and we are just spitballing right now. That's not the way we should be setting policy. So let's have the discussion.
I don't agree with that, and I will tell you why. The ordinance as written is extraordinarily limited to who it applies to. The budget impact and the impact on the plan will be extremely small, and I don't think that's a major consideration.
One of my concerns is it legal to be that narrow? Are we discriminating, and how's the IRS going? So that's the level of discussion we need to have.
Let's our attorney here.
Let's vote on it, and whether we bring this to discussion or an action item.
Fair enough.
I think that's
Okay.
the best way to do it.
Jennifer, please call the roll on keeping this as an action item or as a discussion.
Can someone make a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Councilmember Gross?
Action item.
Well, it's one or the other.
Yeah.
Well, yes is what, as an action item?
Yes is to
You
keep
have
it
to
as an
say one or
action
the
item.
other.
No is to make it a discussion.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Vice Mayor, you made the motion to keep as an action item, and it was seconded by Mayor Lindsay?
Mm-hmm.
And, okay,
So yes is to keep it as an action item, and no is to make it a discussion item.
got it. Yes? Mayor Lindsay?
No.
Councilmember McCormick?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Petros?
No.
Vice Mayor Kaplan?
Yes.
Councilmember De La Cruz?
Yes.
Motion carries. Now, for the approvals, deferrals, deletions, are there any others?
I would like to add setting a date for our council staff planning session as a pre-budgeting process.
Okay.
So that would be item 10A9.
I have 10A11.
I'm sorry, 11?
Yeah.
What am I,
I have supporting schools as 8, gun preemption as 9, tot lot lighting project as 10.
I'm sorry, the tot lot I was putting under the manager's
Manager? Okay.
discussion item, so.
So I have it as 10 then.
Right, so there's, you wanted to switch one with your new proposed 8.
Swapping 1 and 8, yep.
Right, so then Weston lawsuit, Councilmember McCormick, Councilmember Petros, council staff planning session, village manager, the toddler park, and that's it. I think that's all the changes.
Moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, sorry,
Nay.
got it, thank you. Motion carries. Next item is the first reading of an ordinance of the Village Council of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, amending the village code by amending Chapter 23 Retirement, Section 23-31.
Jettie, just a quick question.
Yes.
Do we need to do the manager's agenda, finish it up because it's 10 o'clock, or do we do the order?
Sure, no problem. However you,
It says not later than 10 o'clock.
yes. Motion to authorize the manager to issue the request for proposals to resurface the community center pool deck.
Moved.
Second.
Yes.
Again, I'm for trying to keep things short and sweet. The pool deck, let me see here. Our pool deck consultants estimate that the interior of the pool traditionally need to be resurfaced every 10 to 12 years. Our pool was engineered with a very high-quality resurface treatment system that extended the life of the interior out to 15 years. As the pool approaches 14 years, it would be an optimal time to complete both the deck and the interior of the pool at the same time. The pool closure required to complete this work will be scheduled over the summer. I'm strongly urging that we move forward with doing the deck and doing the interior of the pool.
Any questions, guys?
I did have
Yes.
one quick question. While you're doing this at the same time, and I spoke to Todd about this earlier, can we look at, because we're talking about doing a new pool in our next phase of the community center expansion. And the timeline of that, I'm not sure, but can we consider that as we're looking to price this out? Because we may not need a top-of-the-line surface. We may need something that's only going to be used for the next 3 to 4 years, and try to analyze these concurrently.
That's reasonable, yes.
Thank you.
Please call the question.
Well, I just needed a motion from someone to authorize.
I
the
motion.
Done.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. The next item is a status update on emergency management.
This is just to keep the council informed. Chad and I have been, Brett snuck in while I was sleeping. Chad and I have been working with the emergency management team toward doing a couple of things that we had talked about. Number one was revisiting the debris management contract. Number two was taking a look at how we can address the issue of gated communities. And number three, the issue of, I forgot. The issue of rewriting and hiring a company to come in and rewrite our comprehensive emergency management plan. So this is the update. We've got a lot of tentacles out there, but we will be reporting back on April 10th. And probably the resolution for, Eric, it was the resolution? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Can I just, on the, working on debris management in the gated communities, can we, and I'm sure that you would do this, but make sure that in addition to trying to get the contracts in place, that we have like go out and on the ground set designation areas for where, so that they know exactly where they're supposed to be putting it, where we would get it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, our initial.
In their communities?
It really wouldn't make much difference in the very first sweep because the push is just to get the roadway opened up so we can get back in there. But as a secondary, when they go back in, we'll take a look at that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Next item is the toddler park.
Yes, if I may. On November 14, 2017, the council was asked to approve an RFP bid for award of this contract, and this was for the toddler park lighting project. Council directed staff to investigate an offer by a resident to donate the lights. Mr. Simon Cook from EAC Consulting is here tonight to provide you with an update regarding the village's attempts to incorporate the potentially donated lights into the project and seek direction to move forward. Mr. Cook.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, how are you?
I got in contact with the resident. He was able to provide us with a PDF report on the proposed lights that he would donate. But unfortunately, it turns out he said he was unauthorized to give us the files for the model that I would have needed to complete my photometric analysis. So we attempted to reverse engineer the IES files, but it's beyond our expertise. So that's where we are right now.
Thank you. I guess we need to, what is your next step or recommendation? Do we move forward with whatever you can do?
Well, I think we're kind of at the end of our capabilities as far as these particular lights. You might be able to find somebody who more specializes in the manufacture of these lights to kind of try and reverse engineer those test reports that he was able to provide us.
We don't have to go with this person's lights.
No.
I mean, and it's very strange to me that we can't get the file to do simple photometrics. I mean, that's how everybody ends up selling their lights. I mean, it's just beyond me. I mean, maybe he doesn't want to give the lights. I don't know. But at some point, we're just going to have to make a decision and move on.
Well, I think it was a nice gesture, and I think that point
Sure.
It's now. So I can bring back on April 10th what we need to move this project.
Yeah, we can't stall the project. I mean, just for that.
Is he in good faith but erroneous in his belief that he's not authorized, or is I mean, there's something?
Todd?
I mean, he's a resident, so, you know, it was an offer, we're not able to get the information. I think on April 10th, we can bring back you the original bids with the award recommendation from the village.
But that wasn't his question, though.
Yeah, I'm asking.
But how's he going to do
Yeah,
that? How's he going to do that?
Because he's smart. He has to surmise. What's going on here?
He's speculating.
He very diplomatically said he's a
I
resident.
don't want to speculate.
Thank you.
No, but I mean, I'm curious too. Somebody makes an offer to give us lights and then doesn't quite, I don't understand.
Let's move on, you guys. Let's move on.
Let's keep moving the project.
Thank you.
Oh, change of seats.
Do we have to bring it back to us to approve? Is that what happens?
Well, we brought the original bids back to you. There was this offer. We froze taking.
No, I understand that, but do we have to bring it back because we have to vote on it, right? Is that how it works? Okay.
Next item is
I don't remember.
an ordinance of the Village Council of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, amending the village code by amending Chapter 23, Retirement, Section 20, I'm sorry, Section 23-31 definitions, Section 23-39 vesting, and Section 2347 commencement of benefits to provide for in-service distribution of benefits to managerial members, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, providing for inclusion in the code, and providing for an effective date.
Okay, this is my ordinance. I just want to speak for a second.
Well, you need to move it
I
and
move it.
second it.
I move it.
Second.
Thank you.
Now can I speak to it?
Sure.
There are two reasons for this, and there are two different provisions. First of all, the provision allowing our police and fire chief to waive out of our plan is very important because state law was changed allowing an exception for police and fire chiefs to be in a plan. Our pension plan does not. It requires all uniformed police and firemen to be in the plan, and that means that even if a police officer or fireman fire chief decides not to be in the plan, they still have to be in it anyway. We have to have a reason to let them not be in it, and this provision takes care of that. The second provision on in-service distributions, that's strictly a provision that would benefit us and nobody else. It'll only apply to manager-level people. It'll only apply if we decide that we need to provide the ability to take an in-service distribution in order to retain someone who we think is very valuable and we really want to retain them. It's not automatic. It's not at the option of the employer or manager. It's strictly at our option. And it gives us the flexibility to be able to retain someone we want to retain by allowing us to grant an in-service distribution to this person rather than forcing them to leave. That's the reason for the two items in this motion. And I'd like to turn this over to our pension attorney right now, if we can.
I'm going to speak first. Thanks.
You can. I will allow you to.
Listen, in the 7 years that I've been sitting here, I've never, ever seen an ordinance of this magnitude being passed in this way. I'm concerned. I think we're breaching our fiduciary duty by doing with absolutely no information provided, no analysis. As I said, different municipalities and jurisdictions, when they're doing something like this, not only do they have staff and experts study consequences and assess what the impacts are, but it goes through committee, it's fully vetted, and then it goes before commission or council. So this is not a best practice in how we're doing this. I'm concerned about what we're doing because, as I said, we do not have a full impact assessment in front of us. We don't know what all the impacts of this ordinance is. I'd like to see an impact statement with financial, hiring, and how it affects our finances, our hiring, and our retention of new employees, and whether we're exposed, the village is exposed by the IRS. I'd like to know how this affects the health of our pension plan. I'd like to know if this ordinance is discriminatory. I'm concerned that by being so narrow that it's going to be a problem. At least that's in my preliminary, which I would have done more research, but I got the final ordinance today at 11:40 a.m., so I was unable to prepare fully. But I'm concerned about whether it's discriminatory to all other employees who would like to stay. I'd like to see what the projections of the impacts, what the impacts are today, who qualifies, how we are impacted in 3 to 5 years, how many employees could theoretically fall under this, and whatever, intervals that are needed. I also like to know what the IRS rules are for in-service distribution. How do we prevent double dipping through this? How is that going to be accounted for so that we know exactly what we are creating? And, from what I saw, this is being done usually in plans that are DB plans that are being frozen, and so it's an opt-out for people. But the other thing I'd like to see is what is the trend? My recollection is that municipalities were moving away from this. So why don't we have an analysis of what the best practices are and the whys? I am just really concerned. This may be great, but we have no idea. We're making a huge decision without any of this information. Brett.
I'm very interested to hear what everybody has to say on this subject. A week ago, I would have completely voted this down because I knew nothing, like you're saying, about this. It just came up within 24 hours. And I do agree with you that it has changed within the last 12 hours. And I don't think you're wrong by bringing an analysis forward. But the way that I see it is that the in-service distribution, and I hear the term double dipping, but I've been having trouble figuring out how that actually, how it benefits and has issues with on our end as a village. So let's say our chief of police decides to retire and he decides to go work for another municipality or decides not to work at all. We would still have to pay out his pension, no matter what. Let's say that when that position opens up, we decide to bring somebody else new in. And let's say we bring somebody in from the city of Miami that has been working there. They come here, they're going to be receiving their pension and sitting in that same seat at the same time. Now, if we have in-service distribution, we have an employee that we like a lot here, we want to keep them, it really doesn't make a much difference to us that that person stays in that seat and receives their pension if they had retired, because we would be paying that salary anyways. And on top of that, because if we brought the new person in from the city of Miami, they would go into the pension. So we would then be contributing back to the pension again and putting our match in there, where if we have our own employee that opted out and got in-service distribution, we wouldn't have to put that money in, which actually would be a saving, I guess, on our part if we did that and we were able to keep somebody that we like and want to stay here. So that, for me, when I look at that, whether you want to use the term double dipping or not, it really makes no difference to me. So the way I see it, the only thing that would be a benefit of not doing the in-service distribution would be that our pension wouldn't be paying out in the time that they're working here, and our pension would be much healthier, but our fees would not really, it would not change our costs, from cost in any way. And maybe the employees that would want in-service distribution would be willing to take a slightly lower pay, base salary, in order to stay in that position, and it would be worth it for them, instead of having to go find a new job, which actually could save us more money if we wanted to look at that. So I've been trying to analyze this both ways. That's why I'm very open to hearing all sides of the issue. I'm not telling you that's my vote right now, but that's where I am right now on this issue, because I don't see how it's really a negative for us in any way, because if the chief is retiring, is not going to work for us anymore, we would have to pay that out no matter what that we're looking at. So, and if it's somebody, and basically we're also pinning ourselves in a position where it might be difficult to keep people that we like here, but we're allowing the other people to come and do the exact same thing and sit in that same position.
But this is the challenge. And you know, Chief, I love you. I want to do things right, but this is the challenge I have. Chief is not at retirement age. He chose to engage in the DROP program. So this was something that was completely, selected by him. And so it's an exigent circumstance that was created, and he's not at the top. He could have stayed another 20 years for as far as I'm concerned, and he certainly would not have maxed out his pension.
Which would have been worse for us.
Well, but maybe or maybe not, because it's maybe or maybe not. But are there other options that are just as favorable to Chief Press that maybe have a little less impact on our pensions? I mean, do we have alternatives? Have we explored alternatives? We're just doing this without any analysis of, you know, there's option A, option B, or option C. I don't know that, but that, you know, my understanding is that you can get creative and do the right thing.
I agree with the analysis. I have no problems with doing that. And the other thing I talked to Brett about is that this is not retroactive. This is looking forward, right? And that was something that we discussed also. And, you know, that's something that I wanted to see how that affect also. But yes, I have no problems with doing an analysis. I think you're right. I mean, it's worth taking a look at.
Well, if I might, we can analyze anything until the cows come home. The fact of the matter is very simple. In our structure, this will only possibly apply to two people. Only apply to two people. It can't apply to more. It has nothing to do with employee retention. It has nothing to do with rank and file. It only applies to the police chief and the fire chief, the way this is written, first of all. Second of all, you can do all the financial analysis you want, but when you have one person drawing a monthly pension out of a multi-million-dollar pension fund, the impact to the plan because of that is so minuscule that it's almost impossible to calculate. Third of all, the savings we get from not having to contribute to a new person that we hire that would now be in the plan would far more than offset that. And, you know, you can make all these questions and analyses that you want to come up with. This is not that complicated.
We need to analyze it, and I think it's all, you know, we should be having this discussion. It should be a discussion. I think, you know, the reason why you do these, why you do drop, and why we adopted drop about 5 years ago was to incentivize our employees who were thinking of retiring to retire so that we could hire, as Ed said, people at a lesser rate. And that's part of, and also keep people and recruit people who want to have a career because they see that there's upward mobility. All of these things are valid and are certainly worth talking about. And Brett, and I don't know, listen, I got a call and they were like, are you sure it only affects two people? Residents were calling me today. I'm raising the discussions or the issues that were, because I think if I'm getting calls and people are concerned, we should have a full discussion on this.
Well, why don't we let our attorney that drafted this answer that question?
Brett, what is our management team for police and fire? How many people are on it and how many qualify to retire?
Well, I'm not sure I follow your question. Are you asking how many people would this ordinance apply to?
That's the first question.
Could potentially, yes.
So the way the ordinance is drafted, it would only apply to a fire chief, a police chief, not chiefs, the chief, and then potentially a former fire chief or police chief that's employed outside of the plan. That's the universe of who it could apply to. So it's limited in scope. And just to address another question you had raised, this is fully legal, complies with all the IRS guidelines. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, I sent this to pension lawyer Jim Lynn just to have him eyeball it. And the reason why I sent the revised draft is he had made a few comments on this that I wanted, nothing substantively changed, but just to make sure it was completely kosher, where there was no procedural issues or problems. That's why the revisions were made, but substantively it's the same.
Why didn't we get that type of analysis like we usually get with ordinances, where we have an analysis and recommendations, or we have some kind of vetting? I mean, this just came without any background information. It's troubling to get something at 11:20 or 11:40 and not know what it's based on and not know what the impacts are. I find that to be really bad process.
What other information can I provide you?
So we have a fire management team. Why would it not apply to them? Because they're not chiefs?
Under state law, everyone in the police and fire pension plan, if you're going to get 175 and 185 money,
and that's
is required to be in the plan. The only exception is state law permits the chiefs of each department, one person, to opt out. So really what this ordinance does, there's really two things that this ordinance does. One, and I think Gary mentioned this, it allows the police and fire chief to opt out of the plan, which would enable them to continue on with the village as not participating in the plan. And two, it allows for an in-service distribution. What I would tell you on the in-service distribution part, is that the in-service distribution, the language in here also makes the actual receipt of an in-service distribution contingent upon there being a separate agreement between the village and the individual receiving the in-service distribution. So I know we're talking generally, but obviously you have the chief of police that this affects, and you also have the manager that you will need to address at some point. The police chief, the issue is that the police chief's drop, I don't know the exact date, but ends in the next 30 days. If you don't amend the ordinance to at least allow for the opt-out, this police chief will not be able to be employed here at the end of the 30 days. So that's really the issue. The second issue is the in-service, and that's whether or not, if you choose to amend it to allow him to opt out and stay, whether you would allow him to receive his pension while he stays here. And just one quick note on the pension, just to address your other issue about cost. Chief Press is in the drop right now, which, as you know, means that the pension plan is already paying his pension into the drop account. So the pension plan, the actuary for the plan, already assumes in calculating the plan's fiscal health that benefit will continue to be paid. So they're actually, if you had an actuary do what we call a fiscal impact statement, the actuary's fiscal impact would say no impact, because the plan is already anticipating making those payments because he's already retired and getting payments into the drop. So if he stated he didn't receive it, it would actually be a windfall to the plan. It would be money the plan keeps that it's not budgeting to keep right now, that it's budgeting to pay out.
But again, I mean, some of what you've discussed changed today, 1140. It was a very different ordinance earlier.
Well, no, I would respectfully, Mayor, there's been some tweaks to the language, but the substance of the ordinance is the same as it's been.
The title changed.
I think there was one change to the title.
Yes.
I think there was one change to the title. I see nothing substantive that's different. I think this had predicate, whether this was presented in the most helpful way, given the background, probably not. I take that point. I think this came about beginning sometime last February. I'm ready to vote yes for this right now. Your parade of horribles associated with this, apart from how this was presented, which I think is a fair point, I think this is as close to a no-brainer as I've seen in a long time, and I'm ready to vote yes now. My only problem with this is we have other people that are potentially affected in a slightly different way, but who, with respect to whom we may want the same flexibility that's conferred in this ordinance for the chiefs. And I think we need to have that discussion, which is a separate discussion because the law doesn't allow us to deal with this in this ordinance, as I understand it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I'm ready to go for this.
I'd like to.
Yes, of course, Katie.
Okay. I do think that we've had probably about a week to be thinking about this, given that you brought this up a week ago and then deferred it to this week. And there's two parts to this. The issue about allowing people to waive out makes perfect sense to me. And I think that actually gives us some flexibility. And philosophically, when I think about our pension, I personally think that it's very hard. We are looking to make a fundamental change in how our pension is run. And that's a pretty big deal because it's run one way for many years, and now you're looking to change the actual guidelines of our pension plan. And I don't think these two should be put together. I think that the one addresses the immediate issue, which is being able to opt out. I also think that we can retain chiefs. I think it's cleaner if our chiefs aren't actually still part of the pension and it being forced or needing to contribute, and that if we as a village could move towards creating compensation packages outside of a pension for our chiefs, then I think it helps with negotiations anytime contracts come up, and I think it's a cleaner system. And it also allows our pension to stay as a retirement plan. And so for those reasons alone, I would like to split these two things and deal specifically with the waiver tonight and deal with the in-service distribution in a more global level, Because if we're analyzing this philosophically, I don't necessarily think it should only apply to those two people either. And I think we should have an option, if we're going to be true to the context of that, that we shouldn't be carving out just two people, and we should be analyzing it in a different scope.
Mild point, I see it that way. I just said the same thing, I believe, but we can't deal with others in this manner. We're stuck with the chiefs.
By the state.
Here. We need to have the discussion that you just alluded to more elaborately than I did. We need to do that. I don't think that the answer to this precise question of people that may not fit within the plan as the plan will be as is now, or likely will be restructured. Is that complicated, actually? It probably doesn't affect a significant number of people prospectively. It doesn't affect a significant number of people now, but those that it does affect, that we already know who they are, it affects in a material and adverse way. We know that, and we need to deal with it. But it's not complicated. There's a range of solutions for those problems that consist of 1, 2, or 3 things, really.
But keep in mind, for example, if we were to change this and allow for in-service distributions, that means somebody's kind of technically retired and working here at the same time. If they were for some reason to get disabled, what applies? Does the pension benefits of disability apply, or do our village disability?
Let's let him answer that, but I don't think that it's right to say that they are retired. It is right to say that they're out of the plan.
Yeah.
They're working. That's the whole point is to
in service.
Is to keep people who are valued with an option to continue to work in the village if they choose to and if we choose to have them, and not be penalized financially in a way that would presumably drive them somewhere else.
And it would be a more
If I can
benefit for
add to
us.
that, Katie, and I agree with everything you said about negotiating. This is part of the negotiation because remember, the whole crux of this, the way it's written and proposed, is that it's totally our choice whether or not to include an in-service distribution as part of the package for a chief that we want to retain. It's not their choice, it's our choice. So we can decide we can do this in other ways and not allow the in-service distribution, or we can decide on a case-by-case basis that maybe the in-service distribution is a better part of the program than some other alternative, but it's our choice. At least having this amendment to our plan gives us the ability to have that choice.
Brett,
And it's more, it gives us the flexibility.
That isn't a time, that issue isn't as time sensitive as the other part of this. And if it is a change of our plan, isn't that something that we can give a little more thought to?
Honestly, I don't believe it needs all that much more thought because I think it's such a simple concept and applies to so few people. And it's so important to us to have the flexibility that I combine the two together. Remember, this started out only as an in-service distribution ordinance. The other part, the opting out part, was added because Brett brought to my attention, we've got another problem and we may as well tie the two together because they're closely related anyway. So he said, would it be all right with you if we added that to your ordinance suggestion? I said, sure, I think it's very important. But I don't think it's an either or. I would like to see both of these done at the same time.
I also don't like making decisions that affect things in perpetuity, specifically for one person right now.
But
I
then
think
let's
that's a bad way to deal with it.
Let's
And
decide not to make the in-service distribution part of that package.
But
it's our option.
Don't think of it in terms of cheap press.
if you're putting this
I'm
in
not,
an ordinance,
that's why I'm saying I
how can you
don't
really opt out?
I mean, we're creating another avenue within our pension.
Correct.
No, we're not. We are not doing
It-
that.
you can't do
this
it
is
right
separate and
now.
apart from the pension.
Yeah, but if he can't do it now and he leaves, he would be getting paid.
It's his money.
Absolutely, he would be, because that's what our pension allows.
Yeah.
Now, we would be changing rules within our pension that would allow for something else.
Well,
I
we would
don't
just allow
see
him
it
to
that
work
way.
for us.
I don't see it that way.
And that would actually be more benefit. I see
He's,
it's more
he's going to
beneficial.
leave our employment. So I don't think this is about Chief Press at all. Let me just start with that. This is a general, this is a need for flexibility in the village, in our discretion, to treat people like him in a manner that enables them to keep working when they're out of the plan. If we don't do this, they can't, because they can't work in the village and not be in the plan if he's a uniformed officer, which he is.
Well, we've already, I think, all agreed that that portion of it.
Correct.
So the in-service part is a later decision. This just gives us the right to make that decision.
So if it's a later decision, why aren't we fully analyzing it and bringing it back?
I don't think there's anything to analyze. There's no, as Gary said, there's no effect on the plan. We're going to pay a police chief to use the hypothetical of Chief Press again anyway, whether it's him or somebody else.
I mean,
It's his money. He's entitled to draw it.
The way our pension works right now, we're 91% funded. So theoretically, given all the assumptions, when someone retires, 91% of the money's there. The minute we change any parameter in our pension, which may or may not be coming up, our funding changes.
But this
So
has
these are-
nothing to do with that.
Yes, it does, because then all of a sudden, we're 85% funded.
That's not this issue.
He's already getting his
No,
money.
they all are correlated, which is
They're
what I'm
not.
telling you.
Why do
when
you
we-
say that this decision
Can you let her
affects the
speak and then
funding
you'll
ratio?
speak?
What I'm saying is that any decision with a pension affects funding ratios. And when we make a decision to add a new option in our pension that creates another way to collect money in this plan, that long-term, it will potentially cost the village more.
I fail to see how that's even theoretically possible. It's not only possible, it's certain in the 9 scenarios that we spoke of earlier. It has nothing to do with this issue. No.
Brett, can you speak, am I speaking incorrectly and analyzing this incorrectly?
Well, I think I was trying to say this earlier, but, and again, I know we're trying to speak more hypothetically, but I think it's easier to use specific examples to make an illustration. So again, as I said earlier, Chief Press is in the drop. That means the pension plan right now is making a monthly allocation of his benefit into a drop plan. The pension plan, in all of the actuaries, all the assumptions and the funding ratio, it is already assumed by the actuary now that Chief Press is going to continue drawing his pension. So allowing Chief Press to get an in-service distribution will have no impact on the funding ratio because, again, they already calculate that as being part of the fund liability. Okay? Now, again, I don't want to get into the weeds here, but you have another situation with the manager that I understand is a different situation because the plan is not accounting for his benefit, but that's a whole different scenario. But
Let's just talk about the fact that if we were to allow in-service distributions, would that have a long-term impact on the pension, or would it always be considered neutral? And then there was one other point that I had. I'll come back to it when I remember.
So again, if you're allowing in-service distributions, I'm not the actuary, but the way I understand it is unless you have some sort of an agreement where your employee is agreeing not to take a benefit while they're here, and the actuary is then not calculating that benefit. In any other instance, the plan is already accounting for the payment of that benefit. So to answer your question, it should have a net zero actuarial impact because, again, the plan is already assuming it has that obligation to pay that benefit when that person, quote unquote, retires, whether or not that person leaves or stays. The plan's not assuming that in some instances they stay and we don't pay. It's always assuming that somebody at the end of their drop or when they qualify for their pension, that they start drawing their pension benefit immediately.
Another question, what other things should we be thinking about dealing with in-service distribution? We're going to have this discussion.
Well, to me, okay, the issue for you guys is not so much legal. Everything here is legal. It can be done legally. There's no problem here. I don't think it has a fiscal impact. It's really more of a political perception, public policy debate, right? I mean, that's really the issue here because, again, I think the a lot of what you hear on the negative side of these arguments are, hey, we understand maybe it doesn't cost more money, but we don't like the way this looks. We don't like the way it looks to residents that somebody is, getting a payment and getting a pension at the same time. But it's really more of sort of like public policy, political discussion than it is a legal discussion. Because again, I think Councilman Moss really said this well. At the end of the day, from a dollars and cents perspective, you have to pay a chief of police, whether it's Chuck Press or John Smith or whoever, a salary, and the police chief's already earned that benefit. So the financial obligation to the village, in theory, is going to be roughly the same no matter who's sitting in the chief's position down the road. So it just depends on what your level of comfort. One last thing I'd say is
there's another option where, people plan for retirement. If they're not quite ready to retire, they don't. And they don't necessarily, they vested and they have fully vested and they stay. And that happens a lot in civil service, and people stay because their kids are still in high school or whatever reason. I mean, you see it in every single agency in the state of Florida. People don't just necessarily get up and go. And so that's what you're not necessarily going to retire. You're going to plan your future and say, you know what? I need to wait another 3 years. So I think the assumption that you're going to get up and go and collect your money is not reality in most cases. It's just not.
That touches on the problem that's the other problem, the larger problem, the problem that we have to come back to in bargaining. Because we have a cap, and the cap doesn't work for X number of people in the village right now.
And so we're doing things in vacuums, and we need.
And this gives us the option of, I hate to put Chief Press on the spot, but if he wants to collect his benefit, I'm guessing he can get another job pretty easily.
But does he want to? I mean, Chief, and you know what?
So use anyone, not Chief Press, use anyone for an example. If someone is good enough that we want them to stay, they're going to be able to get another job somewhere else. And do you want to keep someone here tethered, knowing that they're not collecting money that they're entitled to just because?
No, but I also think that if you go into the drop program, I mean, there's an expectation there that you did it voluntarily, you made that choice, and I think it's a policy issue for me, and I was wondering what other options, and the separation from the pension is separate than the in-service distribution. I'd like to know what other options we have. I just don't think that there was enough.
I have another question.
Can I?
I think once it's.
I would like to make a motion here.
Yes.
Let's make the motion. My motion is to approve the way this is all written. And in the meantime, between first reading and second reading, you get information to the people who are looking for the information, and please distribute it to all of us, because I would like to see it too. And if information is good enough, we vote on it, and the second reading, it passes. If it's not good enough, the votes will go no. I think that's the way to move forward on this, because we can go all night on this. So I'm putting the motion on the table.
Okay.
Can I ask
Katie?
one quick question?
Yes.
One thing that I'd like to know that this ordinance doesn't address, if you were specifically talking about our chiefs, and they become contract employees potentially, and they're waiving out, so now they're contract employees. Is this an either or, where you're getting your pension or you're getting a defined contribution plan? Or are we looking to provide both?
No, it's not an either or, because remember, and this goes to what you were saying earlier, we will negotiate with a person that we want to keep him here and provide what we can and not provide what we don't want to. So, for example, if we said to whoever it is, without using names, we will allow you to get your in-service distribution if you stay here, but we will not contribute to a 401k at the same time. We're entitled to do that, and that's our option, because now we have a free rein to do whatever we want to negotiate a contract with that individual. So it's not tied together.
So it's also an option that you can allow them to draw on their pension and get a defined contribution and a salary.
If we wanted to, we could. I'm not sure we would, but if we wanted to, we could, sure.
Now, is there a draft contract floating around?
I need a second for your.
I was sent a draft contract a couple of weeks ago. I made some comments on it, but what I would tell you is that
This is a two-step process, meaning that, again.
But I
sorry,
think
Chief.
that would speak to Katie's, it's not speculative. What's
Well,
the intent,
That's that's what I'm saying. The next step is, because before you can have any kind of agreement with the chief, you at a minimum have to have the opt-out, because otherwise he's got to go at the end of his job. There's no option. So then there has to be some sort of it can either be in the form of an employment contract, or it can be in a very simple one-page offer letter that just spells out, Chief, you're going to continue working. Here's your salary. Here's what sick leave and vacation, whatever you get, and then whatever you want to do on pension. Now, the one wrinkle here is the chief is technically the manager's employee, not the council's employee. So as long as it's basic employment terms, ultimately, it's really the manager's employee. Now, unless there's a more complicated contract that binds the village to severance or things like that, then it really should go before the council for approval. But if it's just a one-page offer letter that says, hey, I'm delighted to keep you here and this is the deal, then that theoretically can be done just between the manager and the police chief. So again, there's a second step here after this in terms of memorializing this, and your questions are fair, but you have
So
to.
we can't negotiate that.
Sure we can.
No.
Can we split these two items?
I
We
want
have a
to,
motion
I
on the-
seconded Brett.
We got a motion on the table.
I seconded Brett. I want to call the question.
Let's call the question.
Councilmember McCormick?
The question, I'm sorry, was.
To approve- ordinance.
to approve the ordinance at first
Is
reading.
here, yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Petros?
No.
Vice Mayor Kaplan?
Yes.
Councilmember De La Cruz?
Yes.
Councilmember Gross?
Yes.
Mayor Lindsay?
No.
The ordinance passes on first reading, and the second reading will be on April 10.
If there are specific questions, please let me know. I will have Jim Lynn available also to help address any issues that any of you have.
And please distribute through everybody
Absolutely.
so we're all aware.
Well, one question, just, are you satisfied with the answer on the impact of the pension? Because that was a serious question, but I think you answered it.
I will actually, I think I can get Pete Strong to actually prepare a impact
right.
statement that I can bring back to you before second reading, that presumably is going to say what I said earlier, hopefully no impact, but we can take care of that.
And if
That's the wrong answer.
you may be interested in the others that are affected that aren't chiefs. That's the other negotiation.
I'd like to see it split. I don't think these two should be together, but that's.
I agree with you.
Okay.
Next item is a second reading, an ordinance of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, amending Section 4-33 kiteboarding relating to additional kiteboarding regulations, providing for codification, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, and providing for an effective date.
Move.
Thank you.
Just want to clarify one thing on there. Number 9, that includes not inflating kites outside the kiteboard channel, correct? So there should be no open, when it just says equipment, we shouldn't see kites inflated and open outside the channel either.
Correct.
I don't understand the bolded language, outside the kiteboard channel.
So the kiteboard channel is the water and the beach that we designated all the way up to the coastal construction line or whatever it was that we decided.
Erosion control.
The erosion control line, thank you. And it just says all kiteboarding equipment when not in use, but you don't want it in use or not in use outside. You just don't want it outside of the kiteboard channel, and I including inflated kites. So I just want to make sure it's clear there.
I'm struggling with the yellow clause, and I don't understand it.
Why it says and outside? Because then it's why it is
It doesn't make
in.
sense.
Yeah, it
It's a
should say
non-
and.
Yeah, what are you trying to say here?
All kiteboard equipment, when not in use and outside of the kiteboard channel, should be contained within a bag. So if you're walking on the beach, then you need to have it in a bag. Or say the beach outside of the kiteboard channel.
If it's in the
So
channel,
if
it
it's
can
not
be.
in use and it's inside the kiteboard channel, then
You
it
can have
just
it
needs to be
outside of
inside
that.
the bag.
Correct.
When not in use, because once you're out past the 300 feet, you're not in the channel.
It means on the
we're on the
beach.
beach.
No.
Maybe
Doing
we
the
have to put
beach.
something there that says the beach.
No, but remember that the beach is within the kiteboard channel.
Yeah.
That's
I know,
why.
but I wonder if maybe
So-
we keep struggling with the word channel. I wonder if other people who haven't spent the amount of time that we have might also struggle, that perhaps we should think of a different word that means
Because I think for most people in regular life, channel means water. I understand that we're extending it the whole length and up to the beach.
Sure.
But maybe if we change the
The
word.
kiteboard corridor, I don't know.
But we already defined it, right? It's,
But-
it's just a definition that's in there, so I
Is
mean,
it?
we can call it
Yeah.
something else, but
It
I
was
just wanted to make
defined
sure
in
the word,
previous ordinance.
the word
Oh, okay,
equipment,
then leave it.
you know, my intention was that you don't have inflated kites all down the beach, that
Yeah.
they only can be within that area, and once you go out of that area, it's pretty much packed in the bag and everything's together, and that's it. And I just want to make sure that's clear, that intent is clear on number 9. That's the only issue I had looking at this. That was it.
Did we lose something along, because somewhere along the way, we had a proposition that the kite would only be inflated when it was really ready to be launched.
Right, that's already passed.
That's in the ordinance as it is.
Yes, yes.
And if you look at
Deployment,
number
it's
3,
it's number
it
2.
talks about on the beach in the kiteboard channel, where it says no more than 10 kites
Yeah,
shall be permitted at one time on the beach,
Within the, yeah, that's right.
within the channel.
number 2 addresses your question before, Frank. Deployment of a kiteboard and kite shall only occur within the kiteboard channel.
That's in the next one. Tab 7.
Did you raise your question, Brett, because of that yellow highlight in 9? Were you confused by that?
I wasn't so confused about it. I just, you know, I look at it and it was actually the word equipment. I just wanted to make sure, you know, it says that, you know, when not in use and outside the kiteboard channel shall be contained within a bag. I guess you have to have it in a bag, so I guess you can't have it inflated, right?
Correct.
But I understand I understand how you can read it 2 different ways, but all kiteboarding equipment when not in use and outside the kiteboard channel, I guess it could be reworded a little bit simpler into one word, one kind of full sentence fragmented like that.
Well, I think it may be even conflicting with number 3.
No. 'cause
No,
number
it's
3
not.
is-
It's the
number
opposite.
3
So
is the opposite.
maybe you just put when outside the kiteboard channel, all equipment must be contained within a bag. You just restructure it so it's not so separated.
We could just break it up into two separate.
2 cents.
What about what he just said? When not in use and when outside the kiteboard channel?
Yeah.
And when outside the kiteboard channel.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And when outside.
That's fine.
Okay. Other than that, I think I'm pretty good on that one.
I'm good.
Got it.
To move it or something?
Can we extend
No, there's a
the
motion
meeting,
already.
by the way?
Yeah, we still.
To extend for 5 minutes?
Yes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Roll call. Councilmember Moss,
Yes.
Councilmember Petros,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kaplan,
Yes.
Councilmember Dela Cruz.
Yes.
Councilmember Gross. Mayor Lindsay.
Yes.
Councilmember McCormick.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted on second reading. The next item is a resolution of the Village Council of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, establishing a kiteboarding registration fee and providing for an effective date.
Moved.
I have 2 things there.
Please.
Small things. The fee, $250 that we have there, is that an annual fee or is that a one-time fee? That's question number 1. Number 2, can there be a reduced rate for residents of the key?
The fee will be an annual fee. As far as differentiating, I don't believe you can charge a different fee for a resident, non-resident, because the beaches came to the village from the county.
But aren't we only giving streamers out to residents?
No, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Only to people that meet these requirements, which is why we put this in place to begin with.
So we can add the annual language in there, $250
We can,
annually?
we can. It really jives with the ordinance. The ordinance provides annual registration, but we can put that,
And if you do annually, should it be done on a certain date, like October 30th or September 1st? And that way, when people come in, so you're not it's not the annual date, your anniversary. It's always a date, and maybe it's prorated when you're coming around.
We were leaving it to really the discretion of the manager of when he wanted to set that up, but it's common to set it at the fiscal year if you want. Just by October 1st every year, you have to pay it. You can set up a pro rata, I mean, just like you do BTRs, business tax receipts.
So we can leave that at discretion of our manager.
Yeah.
Well, what are we going to do for this year? We're past October, and we don't want to wait until October
Half
to
the
put this
price.
in place.
Prorated 50%.
If we do this if I pull the trigger and do this in April, that's half a year. So we would do it for the third and fourth quarter, and then we would start over again. And so,
Also, let's discuss the actual fee, because it's pretty high.
well,
and
the
it-
actual fee is what's done north of us and south of us. It's the county's fee. I'm sorry, the vendor working for the county's fee.
But their operation is an entirely different thing than we're doing. And I have had some residents talk to me in concern of the high cost.
So,
Right, they're running a business, we're not.
right.
And they, not only are they looking for profit, but they're also, you know.
But we have increased enforcement?
Staff on the beach.
Are we going to have a monitor?
No. I think we're going to have police enforcing. But it also means that more police have to enforce.
Okay, so,
Should this be
If we want
$125?
to monitor 250.
Well, let's start with, John, tell us how you came to this number, and then let's
As I
go off of
explained,
that.
it's what
Yeah.
the current
Okay.
vendor uses. Number one. Number two, first year. I don't want to go that far into the conversation, but first year is going to be expensive. We're setting up new programs. We're dealing with individuals for the very first time. I think that the insurance issue is probably the one that people are saying, this is very much more expensive than we're used to, which is why we're working with the insurance company to give us a binder or whatever it's called. So
are we going to have everybody from the north coming?
that's my point. And my last concern was if we start reducing the fee, we'll see a lot more friendly
Yeah,
people in our
Well,
chambers.
that's why I'm curious, Chad, if you could talk a little bit more about our inability to differentiate between residents and non-residents, because that was something from the beginning that we were kind of banking on.
Sure. The beaches came to the village from the county, and I would feel pretty confident that the county would object to us doing that. It's very common when the county transferred, and I know we don't consider the beach a park, but for example, when the county transferred parks to the village, which I know we didn't get any, but if you did, the county would,
Bad example.
I know, but they would put in a requirement that you have to charge the fee equal across the board. And I think it's similar, no, because we didn't have any parks, but I think it's similar to the beach park, how we allow only village residents because that's ours. That's why we can do that. But I don't think that you can charge differing fees within the beach of Key Biscayne, which is a public beach. It's not a village.
But when you go to the golf course, you can get, if you show your ID and you're a Miami-Dade resident, they give you a resident fee
You're a
structure, right?
Miami-Dade resident. That's right.
In Miami.
Everybody in Miami-Dade.
But we can't do that locally.
Municipalities that if you do participation in parks, whether it's sports activities as well, that there's a resident fee versus
Correct,
a non-
because they own the park. They bought the park, or they acquired it.
Are you sure they weren't all transferred to?
Yes. I've been through this a lot with newer communities. Look, I'm happy to go to the county. I'm just telling you that in my experience with them, when these types of issues come up, those beaches were given to the village, or they're within the village, for the public as a whole. We have public access easements that are available to the public as a whole, and I don't think that they're going to support that, but we can, look, I'm happy to ask.
I mean, there's got to be a law. I mean, it's got to.
It's Article 7 of the county charter, which says that they treat all parks the same, basically. So it's public space. I mean, that's how they treat it.
But
in other words, would you like to have the county charge less money to residents in UMSA to go into Crandon Park than residents that live in Key Biscayne?
One more minute.
Think about.
I make a motion for 5 more minutes. It's
Move, second.
If you think about the inverse.
Aye.
Thank you.
Is there any, do we have any increased?
We
right
are
that we
residents of Miami-Dade County.
That's correct.
So what is the inverse? I'm not sure.
I'm just saying, if, for example, the city of Miami acquires property in the city of Miami, right? They can charge a different fee between city of Miami residents and non-residents because they acquired it with their own funds and everything.
I understand the difference between them acquiring it and it being transferred it to us by Miami-Dade County.
Right, so that's really the issue.
Well, okay, so
we can
why don't
pass this
let him
tonight.
Study this, because
But we can pass this and always make
I'm happy
amendments
to go-
later, right?
I'm happy
How
to go
about-
to
let's
the
pass it.
county. I'm happy to go to the county and ask. I don't want to be in a situation where we do that and then we get,
Well, I don't want to ask the county. I want to find out if it's legally.
Well,
I
I'm telling you,
understand this was
pretty-
looked into 6 years ago, and this is that, and it was a no, so on a similar issue.
On what kind of an issue?
I think the idea is $250 adequate? Should we lower it?
Councilmember, this was discussed.
Come up so everyone can.
Then Councilmember Mike Davey, when this first came up, because his idea was to limit this only to Key Biscayne residents. The answer was flat no. You cannot do it.
But
It's a
this,
public
this
park.
is
You
different.
can't differentiate in the cost. You know, it's just,
So access, I think we're not discussing access at this point. We realize that, I think, but it's can you have two different fees, a resident fee and that's slightly different. So that was the
well,
kind
I
of
think you may
nuance.
have a different if you're a county resident, but I think you're swimming upstream.
I hear what you're
Because we tried to, this has been gone over a number of times, and I'm just telling you
I
that
appreciate
we never came out a way that we could do it the way you were talking about.
What about
I'd
the
like to, I'd like to make a motion. Let's pass this at $175 annually and come back with us, and we can always amend this resolution afterwards.
Okay.
Yes.
But you gotta realize that if we're less money than the guy down the street, everybody's gonna come to us.
Well, we have 6 months
The other
to
one's at
determine what
250?
happens, and we can change it
Let's keep it
as
at
appropriate.
Let's keep it at 250 then, and then we can make adjustments. Because they're going to be paying a 6-month anyway. So, okay, the motion is to keep it at 250, add annually.
Yep.
And and then we can come back and
We'll
revisit this
revisit.
if we need to.
Everybody good?
Second.
Call the, do I have a second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
We've had people here all night just wondering if they
Oh,
can
yes.
have their competition on
We're
May.
about-
Yeah, that's the next one.
The
So
next item is
It's just
karate tournament under mayor and council.
We're out of time. We need,
So we have
We have 3 more
okay,
minutes.
3 more minutes.
so let's get it done.
So I would say yes, let's do it. Let's encourage them. Let's help them make it a success. I think it's fine, and
Todd, is there any conflict on that date? Is
What-
everything okay?
What do you need, what
What do you need
troubleshooting
from
do you
us?
have that we need to address as we give you a blanket and resounding?
I think they're willing to work on the parking. This is before you, because it's our blanket policy not to rent the entire facility to a group substantially from off the island. But I think this process, where anybody who has one that think it merits consideration can come to the council, is the way we should go moving forward. But I've met with them. I think we can work to accommodate what they're looking for this one specific event.
And they are
From
residents.
the whole
They are
gym?
residents, but
And can we-
people that will be,
Yeah, I understand.
Can we give them the whole gym? What is the plan?
from what I understand, for it to work, it has to be the whole gym.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be the whole community center. What exactly are you implicating?
It would be the entire gym for the entire day, the meeting room, the multipurpose rooms upstairs, which really aren't, we'd probably have to move one yoga class, which we have space now to move it.
Okay.
So I think, other than the gymnasium for the entire day, there'll be little disruption.
And they're paying for it, right? They're renting.
Yes, we're working on a rental fee.
And they're coming via bus, you're taking all the parking spaces, my understanding.
That's what we've been advised.
And that will be enforced.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Great.
Do you need any more, you got direction? Nothing formally from us?
A motion or?
Do you need a motion or
No.
No, just direction.
No?
We're good.
congratulations?
Motion to adjourn?
second.
Second.
Good night,
Meeting
thank
is
you.
adjourned.
Thank you.